Yeah.
And then they float away.
Well, that's it. Let's take it before I get back.
Yeah.
You ready?
24th. My little boy's birthday.
I'd like to welcome each and everyone to the March 24, 2016 Walton County Zoning Board of Adjustment. If you would, please stand as we have our invocation followed by the pledge. Tony, if you would do the invocation, please.
Our heads. Lord, protect us who must travel in this wet and dangerous evening, and provide us with wisdom and patience as we do the county's business.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. We do appreciate the board members that's here tonight. We do have two that is not, Tammy and Kevin is not with us. We appreciate Carrie for her hard work putting this meeting together. We appreciate our legal counsel for being our legal counsel tonight. Welcome back. And the other planning department and the other legal counsel that is representing the county. Are there any announcements that needs to be made at this time?
Mr. Chairman, may I address the board on a procedural issue with regards to the first application before you this evening on the TPOL? This evening, we are requesting on behalf of staff, first of all, my name for the record is Carrie Parsons. I'm from the law firm of Neighbors, Giblin and Nickerson.
You want to go ahead and get started in the first item?
Yes,
we will in just a minute. We need to do the swearing in, and it's my understanding that there's a possibility that we may have different legal counsel to represent this board. Is that in the works?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, that is. It should take effect May of this year.
Where are you going?
We're actually going to go out for an RFQ for legal counsel to represent you guys and the code board, and then that would allow us to represent staff if we needed to.
It is, I think it's worth this board to discuss this tonight.
Sure.
I would like to entertain discussion at the end of our meeting. So anyone here that would like to stick around for that, we would like for you to stay. But I do think the board needs to discuss a little bit about it. I would like to. And with that being said, each and every person here tonight that is participating to speak before this board, you need to stand, raise your right hand, and be sworn that the testimony that you give will be the truth.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give before this board will be the truth? Thank you. Whenever you come to speak on any item, if you would just say your name for the clerk and state that you've been sworn in. Thank you.
Before we get started, we have, I think, 5 items before us tonight. We have 5 board members. For it to be approved, you have to have 4 of the 5 to approve it. If you want to wait until we have a full board for yours to hear the case that you may be involved in, you have the right to do that. But each and every person needs to know that 4 of us has to agree for it to be approved. And you can make that decision as we go and as we begin. Now, if you would like to go with your procedure, state your name, please, because that did not. What's your name?
Yes, good evening. My name is Carrie Parsons. I'm from the law firm of Neighbors, Giblin and Nickerson in Tallahassee, and I'm here on behalf of the Walton County staff this evening. With regards to the TPOL application, which I believe is application 1, which is before you this evening, there is a procedural matter that we wish to address. Just for some background purposes, Mr. DeFrances, who is appealing the TPOL permit denial, also has another denial that will be coming up before you at your next month's meeting, and that is for a single-family residence. It's been denied for the same purposes that the TPOL permit has been denied, and it's on the same exact property. And as such, his counsel did ask that those two be combined so that it only comes before you once, as it's the same issues that you will hear in both instances. Staff agreed that it would be more beneficial so that you didn't have to hear it twice. Unfortunately, when we went out and advertised it, we only advertised for the T-pole appeal this evening. And as your council could expound upon in quasi-judicial proceedings, for not only the applicant and staff, but also for citizens, for due process to be met, you have to give notice and an opportunity to be heard. Because the T-pole issue is the only issue that has been advertised for this evening, that would be the only one that can come before you this evening. And staff is respectfully requesting and apologizes for the inconvenience that this be continued until next month so that we can properly notice both this and the single-family residential permit.
Mr. Perkins, I have a real issue with the item that you're discussing. I believe it was in 2010, was it not, that year that came before this board? This board heard that case. This board denied the appeal. It was appealed to the circuit court. The circuit court upheld our decision. It is their position from that point to take it to the appellate court. It is not for this board to hear it again. Just because they want to paint this wagon a different color, it still is within an easement. We cannot approve a structure, a T-pole in an easement. If we start doing that, then we're going to open up all types of legality, and it disappoints me that our legal counsel on both sides has not referred that to the applicant. I mean, it is ridiculous that we're even considering this.
And Mr. Chairman, I and the staff completely agree with you. That being said, we weren't going to address that procedure if you decide to continue it tonight. If you continue it tonight, when both come up next time, we'll address that issue with you.
Are we setting precedents here that we take and hear a case, we make a decision, the circuit court takes and hears it and upholds our decision, and then you can do it again? How many times are we going to hear the same issue?
And Mr. Chairman, that is a procedural issue that we want to discuss with you. We don't want to discuss that tonight with you. We want to discuss that when we have both of the permits before you instead of
What
one.
I want to discuss tonight, entertain the motion not to hear it, because we don't have jurisdiction. I would like to have a motion from this board, and it's up to this board. But it's my position, we don't have jurisdiction to hear it. I don't think that it's right for legal counsel on their side to take the issue, to hear the same issue over and over. I strictly don't think we have the right to hear it, and I don't think that we should continue it. I don't think we should hear it. If they don't like, if we get that motion and we get it approved, then take it to the circuit court and let the judge tell us. Because he done said one time, we uphold your decision.
And Mr.
And then
Chairman,
you're gonna sit there and tell me
I
we got to hear it
completely
again.
concur with you and agree with you. What I'm saying is for this evening, we're requesting a continuance so we can address that when we
Well,
have both of the
The
permits
last
before
time we
you.
was here last month, I said we would do a contingency, and we got a motion and voted, but we wouldn't continue it again. In my opinion, it's up to this board. I like to have a motion not to hear it, that we don't have jurisdiction here.
Mr. Chairman, could we have an opinion from our legal counsel?
That's what I was gonna suggest.
Well,
I don't think so, because our legal counsel should have done and revised them that this is the issue that's already been before this board, it's been to circuit court, and I think that our legal counsel, wasn't Bart Davis on the other side of the fence in this?
no, sir, I don't
He
believe
didn't
so.
represent the Francesca.
Mr. Davis has a conflict of interest because you represent Mr. DeFrances on another matter, not
And you
this
don't,
matter.
and you don't think that you should recuse yourself of
No,
being
sir.
in the same?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay, if you want to hear it.
And-
go
and just to
ahead,
be
but
clear-
I'm disappointed that they allowed it to get to this point.
Okay. I think that procedurally what we need to do, I understand Mr. Johnson's feelings on this matter, but we do need to consider the request for continuance first before we discuss how we would handle the
If we don't
case.
have jurisdiction over it, then why should we take
That-
and continue?
I understand, but that would be a matter for Ms. Minshew to address and Ms. Parsons to address at a full hearing, should you guys have a full hearing.
I think if we do not allow them to continue until next month, we are in effect denying that they have a right to be heard. And I don't think it's fair to tell them that they don't have a right to be heard. If they come back next time and there's a stare decisis decision that has been done before, then
It's
so be
already-
it.
It's already been heard.
Well, that's what stare decisis is. But let's decide that in the future rather than right now, because, well, I wasn't involved in this original case. I don't know what This was 2010, I wasn't involved in it. It seems to me that there's no harm done in having them come back and argue their case. If they don't have jurisdiction, then they'll throw it out. But to throw it out right now before they're being heard doesn't seem fair to me.
I've said my case. Scott, what do you think?
I'm just sitting here writing, I don't even remember it from 2010.
It's an easement.
I
He
know.
received the easement and a tax deed. He wanted to put up a T-pole. You can't put up a T-pole in a camper.
Well, I understand that.
And-
Easement.
And Mr. Chairman, I do want to address that procedural issue with you, but first I would like to know if there's
I would like to go
a
ahead to our
continuance.
discussion, and they're gonna vote either to continue and not continue, okay?
Well, I wasn't here either, but I'm just curious, why don't we go ahead and deny the continuance and deal with the issue tonight, and surely they will draw the next case.
Because they didn't do proper notice. We can hear the T-post tonight.
Right.
And that, but they're gonna go ahead and put in, now that, not only do they wanna put a T-post in the easement, now they wanna put a structure in the easement. It's done and been denied.
Oh, that's what they said?
So they
Yeah.
want to continue because she did not do her job like she should have, in my opinion, and file it all at one time. So now then they paint this thing where we're gonna continue it again.
Sorry, Mr. Fletcher, just to answer your question, there was an issue with the notice. Dr. DeFrances applied for 2 permits, one for a T-pole, which is on your agenda for tonight, and then another, a building permit. The issues are going to be very similar, if not completely similar. And Ms. Minshew did contact me and Ms. Thiemann well over a month ago and asked that the building permit be heard at the same time as the T-pole. It was our mistake that it wasn't properly noticed for tonight. So I think that they're just asking that they both be heard together. And I would recommend that we consider the continuance first before we delve into the issues of the case.
I make a motion that we allow the continuance until next month.
Scott, do you want to say something?
Um,
Tony?
Well, I made a motion. It needs to be seconded before, or turned down before.
I'll second for discussion.
If we continue, do we have the option of not hearing in the future?
I'm sorry, not hearing on the basis of the argument that Ms. Parsons was presenting?
Well, that it's the same presentation again, or that it's the same appeal, which we...
No, we would have to hear both of them. So it does make sense if the board is inclined to hear them both together, because they will be substantially the same issues.
This amazes me. It's just amazing.
And
So basically, any decision that we make doesn't stand up in concrete. because
Mr.
they
Johnson,
can reappeal it.
no, I understand where you're coming from, and it's my understanding staff will present that whenever we have a full hearing. I think right now we're on the issue of whether or not we should grant them a continuance to hear both issues together.
So once
We
it's
still
heard, it
have
could
to
be-
provide the applicant an opportunity to be heard on the matter before the board makes the decision.
But once that's presented by staff, the board could then, at that point, dismiss it.
Yes, Mr.
And
Val.
then they can file the appeal again, and then we can have to hear it again, and it's done again through circuit court. That's what they do. They filed it, it lost, they filed the T-post, so now they filed a residential building permit. I guess they're gonna apply for a commercial development, and then I guess there'll be a shopping center. I guess it'll just keep on.
I guess that begs the question, Sydney, where is the limit? Where do we stop hearing these things?
That's a good question, Mr. Fletcher, and I understand Mr. Johnson's frustration with the situation. My goal is to ensure that the applicant has access to due process and a fair proceeding, and that's all I'm trying to accomplish.
The circuit court
I
upheld it.
understand, Mr. Johnson, and I think that
Well, I
those are valid
respectfully-
arguments for us to
I
hear.
respectfully disagree with you, but we have a motion, we have a second to continue. How the board vote? Tony?
Aye.
To continue.
To continue.
Aye.
Nay?
Aye.
You got your continuance.
Just for the record, we didn't request it, the staff did.
Just for the
Staff
record,
made
you
it.
got your continuance. We can see
Thank
you next
Thank you,
month.
Mr. Johnson. Appreciate all your courtesy tonight.
The second item on our agenda is per bill variance.
I take last call. Blood pressure, you need something about something.
there is no way,
I know.
there is no way that our attorneys should allow this to happen. Now, this is ridiculous.
But they have. I mean, they've allowed it to happen. I mean,
Do you need some bus stop?
You know why they allow it to happen? Because this board didn't stand up for it. The circuit court's already heard it. You can't put a structure in an easement. We had a structure of the easement, we made them tear it down. And Mr. Jones, he built a garage over an easement. This board made him tear it down. You can't build in an easement. I mean, this is ridiculous.
But obviously, we're not going to discuss that until it's heard before the full
I'll
board.
discuss it when I get ready to discuss it for the next hearing. Melissa, do you want to present your case?
Good evening, Melissa Ward with Saxon LeSueur. On the matter of the Corville petition for variance, our clients are requesting a continuance to allow for the opportunity to have more board members available and to meet with staff concerning some of the objections they've received, if that's acceptable to the board.
Motion to continue.
motion to continue.
Second.
Second.
How the board vote?
I did, and Tony second. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you?
Tony, how do you vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. Yes, ma'am.
Are you up on the next one?
Yes, sir. One moment, please.
Yeah, I know.
David Leach Barrett's. Are we going to hear that one, Melissa, or are you going to Barrett's? Or are you going to continue it?
No, so we're going to hear it.
I'm gonna leave my license. That's gonna be number 3, isn't it? Go ahead, Melissa.
Yes, sir. Melissa Ward with Saxon LeSueur. What you have before you is an item of a requested variance for Mr. and Mrs. David and Bernadette Leach. This is a first time for the Board of Adjustments, and this variance concerns the floodplain management ordinance. We are going to go a little old school with the board this week or this month. Typically, we like to use digital display and all that fancy stuff, but it wasn't working out so well, so we have exhibits to hand out. So what I will do this evening, if it's all right with you, is go through the exhibits, and as I hand them out to span out, and so we can discuss them individually if that's all right. Colleen Sachs, attorney with Saxon LeSueur, is here to discuss some legal issues, and Lois LeSueur is here to discuss planning issues in regards to the building code and the planning code to help this along to answer any of your questions. And the owners are here too to answer any questions if you have them. They have with them their engineer, a surveyor, and some affidavits in regard to the situation which brought us here tonight. I believe I have a narrative that we prepared for the variance. Did you put the narrative in the packet? Okay. Just for the record, I'm just going to turn in our narrative examples. You may already have it in your packet. Oh, I'm sorry. The issue, to really just draw it down into a small picture, is that the owners built a house. And in the process of building the house, going through the permitting process, this is an AE7 flood zone. and they're required to have a finished floor elevation of 8 feet. At the end of where they ended up stopping, in January, they found out that their finished floor elevation is 7 feet or just below. And so, of course, they're not in compliance with the floodplain ordinance, and they had to stop. Some critical information is what we're going to hand out to you. What we're going to start with are some of the building permit issues. The first thing I'm handing to you, and for convenience they're marked with a stamp on the bottom as to what we call them in our exhibits, is the planning and flood review application for building permit for Mr. Leach's property, Mr. and Mrs. Leach's property on Paradise Point Lane. It's listed as Leach Exhibit 1. On page 2 of that review and application, highlighted in orange, probably about a fourth of the way down or less, we highlighted that it notes very clearly that an elevation certificate will be required prior to framing inspection, and a final elevation certificate is required before issuance of a certificate of occupancy. And we would like you to focus on the fact that it is an elevation certificate required prior to framing inspection. The inference being, at that point, you've already built the frame and you're now getting it inspected. So the floor, finished floor elevation is being reviewed for compliance after you've already built the walls. That is not a problem with the building department review. Like, I'm not saying a reviewer did something wrong. I'm saying that the process leaves something absent and therefore creates a problem for people who are building homes. If you are getting an inspection after you've already built the walls, which is normal, but you don't get the inspection of the finished floor elevation before you go vertical, then you could go lower or higher than necessary before you're building your walls. So you're already building the walls before they're checking to see if you met your finished floor elevation.
Who's the contractor?
Well, the contractor was the owner of the home, and he is a contractor, but he typically does condo revisions inside condos, not building homes.
Who's the slab subcontractor?
You want me to get the applicant to come tell you who the...
Okay.
We'll look at the information. Okay. The next item, exhibit, it's called Leach Exhibit 1.1, is the elevation certificate that was for residential home, turned in February. This is the pre-construction or the plan stage of looking at the permits in February of 2015. It's highlighted on the front page that the top of the bottom floor, the finished floor elevation, is predicted to be 8 feet. That's where it was supposed to be. That's what he was expecting to do, and that's where he was planning to build to. That was turned in when they turned in for their plan review.
Are these being marked Exhibit A and B?
Yeah.
They're marked on there with what we've called them on exhibit numbers.
Exhibit one.
Exhibit 3A and 3B.
And looking at your Exhibit 3B, you said the surveyor is here? Volker?
Mr. Volker is not here. I was going to get into that with you, but I'm glad to do it now. We requested that Mr. Volker attend to be able to talk to us about it. He decided not to come, said it was unnecessary. That's what he told me, so I'm just telling you, I'm conveying what he said when I asked him. It's simply a variance request. So, Mr.
You know, this is the second one we've had a problem with Mr. Volker, and I think in 6 months, and he don't think it's important for him to come here and sit before this board and explain to me why he can't do his job. I would like to take and have this postponed until he comes and tells us. Would you have a problem with that?
Actually, I know I don't want to be contradictory, but we'd like to finish at least the exhibits. We have a reason to go through the rest of the exhibits so we can explain what we believe happened.
Okay,
And I apologize. I've asked him, we've talked to him, the owner has talked to him, we're glad
you
to let
can
you
put
speak
all
to
the
him.
exhibits you want to on this, but it's bottom line, it falls on the surveyor.
It's very difficult for the owner to have to wait for a surveyor who doesn't wish to comply.
Well,
He is being held up from finishing his building and from doing what he needs to do because the surveyor doesn't wish to own up to anything. That's a hardship on him that's unfortunate, but how do we make him come to the meeting?
we did it with Cox Pool. I mean,
How did we
you
do
want
it?
us to get a subpoena for him? I think he needs to come. I mean, this is continuing to be an issue, and he's the one that creates the issue. Before what? Hmm?
I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. I was talking with Mr. Dice. I know we can issue subpoenas for the code board. I would imagine that we could for this board as well, since it's a quasi-judicial board, but that's something I would have to check before next meeting.
We have a surveyor that continues to create issues and problems. He refuses to come and represent his work.
Yes, sir.
Now, you know, and it's not the builder's fault. They shouldn't even be here asking for it. Who is going to, who does he answer to? I mean, who can sit there and say, you don't do surveying in Walton County anymore?
He answers to the Florida Department of Agriculture, is who he answers to.
But would you not agree that he's the one that created this problem?
Not till I finish seeing what all they want to present. Because I don't know that he did anything wrong. I haven't seen, all I see is a
It doesn't
preliminary
bother you-
flood
It
survey.
doesn't bother you that he's not here to?
That bothers me.
And does it bother you that this is the second or third time he has not
That
showed up?
bothers me.
We'll let you go ahead and listen.
Thank you, sir.
Is that my subpoena?
We have several.
Yes, sir. If you guys want to continue it and wish to subpoena him, I can get an answer tomorrow, and I'll issue a subpoena for the next meeting.
We're gonna continue the meeting and we'll see where it goes. I mean, this is,
Thank you, sir.
for some reason, you have to get his attention. If he thinks he can do work that is, he's not being held up to, that he puts a certified surveyor to, that you pay for it, and he doesn't respect this board or respect his job or his industry, then somebody needs to get his attention. And I think the one that we had at the bottom line, if we deny this, he could be like the other one that we did a few years ago, paid to correct it.
Yes, sir. That could be the case, but I haven't heard all the facts.
Go ahead.
The next item that I've passed around is the building plan and flood review dated at the top of the front page on the right is 6/18, signed on 6/19. And it shows that it has a flood elevation, a minimum finished floor elevation of 8 feet. We have
Who signed it?
that particular form was signed, I believe, by Mr. Alan Cracker. Aaron, sorry. In addition to that, we have a survey that was turned in, a foundation survey. So Specifically, this survey was, and there's some notes on it so that we can pull out a few things to your attention. The survey was signed by the Building Permit Flood Review Approval, reviewed by AC, date 6/19/15. So on the same day as the flood plan review, where it says the minimum finished floor elevation is 8 feet, this foundation survey was signed. This foundation survey, and the reason that this is important is we blew it up in pictures for you. In the center of the footprint, of the foundation survey, there's some small print. We blew it up for you. It looks a little bit like this on these next exhibit I handed out. And it says that the finished floor elevation is 6.68 feet. This is a foundation survey turned in and dated 6/19 by the county. Finished floor elevation says 6.68, but his flood review paperwork says that it is 8 feet. Minimum floor elevation is 8 feet.
Okay, hold on one second,
Yes, sir.
please, Melissa. So on this sheet, the county approved this at 668.
Yes, sir.
And
Appears
this
so.
sheet, and this sheet clearly shows that it is at 668 per the survey and the flood cert that he did.
It is a
at the
picture of that
foundation.
piece. Yes, sir.
Okay.
This, what we hand out now is an elevation certificate. Residential, it's marked for construction drawings, which means it's not the under construction, it's the initial elevation certificate turned in with the original building permit. It is signed on page 2 by Hal Laird on 6/19 as the certified floodplain manager with a minimum floodplain finished floor elevation of 8 feet. On the same day, you have a plan review approved at a minimum 8 feet. You have a elevation certificate on the second page where Mr. Laird says a minimum flood elevation is 8 feet. That's the design code. But you have a foundation that was on June 19th, a foundation survey that states that it's 6.68 feet, which is a 1 foot plus less than what it's required to be.
Okay, now the one you're just putting out is a preliminary flood cert.
It is, but if you look at the second page, on this very same day, Hal Laird signed it, 6/19 of 2015, that it's at 8 feet.
Is he not just signing it saying that, yes, this is going to be proposed to be built at 8 feet or higher, being we've got a 1 foot freeboard?
And I agree with that. The question is, why would they sign this at 8 feet and then have a foundation survey at 6.68 that they approve?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Bingo.
But this is, I'm a little confused first, because
Yes,
something
sir.
doesn't make sense to me. This is the building permit review,
Yes, sir.
which happens before you have a foundation.
Absolutely.
Why is this shown as an actual foundation?
I unfortunately don't know the answer to that. What I'm questioning and what we're questioning before you today is if the county signed off on a foundation survey that says 6.8 and it is less than the 8 that is required, they did not communicate with the applicant or the construction, the general contractor or the contractor, that it was less than the required.
My question is, was the foundation in place on 6/19?
The original permit started in February of 2015.
But was the foundation in place on 6/19?
I would have to look at the dates. I'm just
Okay.
going through the exhibits so that we can go back to that.
Because you're giving me an application and what would be a preliminary elevation certificate with something that's already looks like it's been built.
What we would like to be able to draw out of this conversation is that the building department review process is a little bit skewed from what you would, it's not as linear as it should be. And we're jumping around different from my exhibit, so I apologize if I'm staggering a little. But the building code requires that you have a foundation, that you submit your elevation certificate and you get an inspection before you go vertical. That's not what happens in Walton County. And that is part of the problem of why we're here tonight. And we would recommend that in the process of looking at this variance, that we would also look at the building review process, where there is a stopgap that says when you are building a house, whoever you are, that before you go vertical with your walls, that we look and make sure that your foundation is where it needs to be, especially in a flood zone, particularly in a flood zone.
But the builder has that option at any time to come out and have a surveyor go ahead and certify that elevation.
That is true, but the building code requires that the building official
That
before they allow the permit to go vertical.
But
It
that
is by
allows them to
code.
take the risk and not have a delay. But if they have the surveyor come out the day that they don't have to wait for the slab to be dry. They can have him actually out there when the block is being
He
filled.
had the elevation certificates. I mean, not to be argumentative, but he had the elevation certificates. Anytime he was required to turn in a document, he had the surveyor come out and do the job. Nobody told him until January of this year that he was below the elevation.
That's a different thing, but there's something that looks unusual in seeing what looks like an actual survey versus a preliminary drawing with a preliminary elevation certificate and a planning review on the same day.
I honestly cannot answer that. I can tell you that they submitted in February, that in June is when they got their plan review signed off on. The dates are on there by the building department, and the foundation survey clearly shows the foundation at 6.8 and signed the same day.
Now, is this is an actual size document?
Actual size document.
I would say no.
That's a printing from, the document is actually probably 24 by 36.
I think it's actually smaller.
I think it's a ledger size scaled down to something, or maybe a half sheet.
I have a scan of it. I apologize for that. That's a scan that I got from the building department.
It's not signed and dated.
This is
Mine's
just
signed, well, I see the signature from planning.
One question I've got, Melissa, is
Yes, sir.
the field date on this survey
Yes, sir.
is February the 2nd of 2015.
Yes, sir.
That's the field date the survey was done, that this stuff was in there.
Yes, sir.
How come the owner saw this at 668, and this guy's a contractor? How come he didn't throw a flag up and stop right then saying, that's wrong? Now, he had this in February. Why did he not go up there and say, something's not right, I'm 1.5 feet below freeboard, we need to stop what we're doing, what's going on?
And the owner is here to answer questions.
Okay.
Go ahead and bring him up and let him answer that question.
Do you want to answer through these others first?
No, I think we should go.
Okay. Mr. Leach is here to answer questions.
Mr. Leach?
Hello, Mr.
State your
Johnson.
name for the record, please.
My name is David Leach, Leach.
Go ahead, Scott.
Again, the survey shows that February the 2nd. How come you didn't stop construction and ask the surveyor what's going on about the flood?
I didn't. I'm a CBC licensed contractor. I'm not defending, as far as I go, but I do mostly condo remodels. I built 3 homes in Walton County. 2 of them have been for myself, and 1 was a spec home in Bayside in 2012. When I was called by the county to get the inspection or get the elevation over there, I picked it up from Mr. Volker's office. He didn't say a word to me. I brought it directly to the county. I dropped it off. I did not even look at the printing on the foundation survey. If there would have been a problem when I picked it up from Mr. Volker, I would have expected for him to say, Dave, Mr. Leach, we have a problem with your elevation before I took it to the county. So
he didn't say anything about that?
No.
With him knowing that it's in a flood zone?
No.
And him knowing it needs to be at 8 feet or higher?
Now, I did.
I'm just.
I did
I'm
pick it
just
up.
saying.
I did pick it up from, he wasn't in the office, the secretary was there, it was ready to pick up, stamped, ready to go, and I just picked it up directly there and took it to the county. Honestly, I didn't even look at it. I'm guilty of that, not observing it. I've learned a lot of valuable points here, but I did not. At the time, I assumed that was okay.
And I guess as a homeowner, and you're relying on a professional to give you the right direction, and I guess this guy will let you down, huh?
Yes, sir.
Weren't you told when you started that you had to have a foundation survey?
What-
Were you told that you had
Yes.
to have it, and the planning department explained that to you, right?
Right. And I brought the survey to
And
him.
you hired a professional to do the job, right?
That is
And he's
correct.
let you down, right? So you don't have a problem, we deny this and have him tear all that out and redo it tonight? You don't have no problem?
I do have a problem with that.
Why do you have a problem with it? Don't you think that would get his attention?
It would get his attention, but at this point in my house, January 6th was when I was told that I did have a problem, and I was sitting with Aaron. We thought it was a typo, and I went to Mr. Volker's office, and he said, "No, that's the correct elevation." I am 500. I have the roof, and I'm way too far on this house. But I understand what you're
So
saying.
the
about
problem
turnout.
is you relied on a professional surveyor to do your survey. You have a set of plans stamped by the planning department, everything's okay, and you're getting ready to move in, and they say you got a problem.
Yeah, I'm getting ready. I was going for my electrical and plumbing rough-in inspection before I started insulation.
You gonna file with the state on Mr. Volker?
I'll have to speak to my attorney on that matter.
And
Can we make that-
our concern with that solution would be that maybe Mr. Volker doesn't have, insurance or, can't afford to tear the house down and rebuild it, plus it would put him 2 years behind getting his home built.
Could I ask, if you
According-
had the ballpark, what would it take to correct this, tearing down and rebuilding?
I'm $500,000 into the structure right now. So we have the roof on, tile, stucco, windows set, everything framed. I would have to take, from the roof, it basically have to be torn down to the slab in order to get, I have my structural engineer, Mr. Mike Newell here, who has been through the house, and, as an opinion, if you would like it as a professional, as far as what we can do.
Do you have, is a bank involved, or are you cash on this project?
Cash.
Well, according to Lois's concern about the insurance, according to Florida Administrative Code 5J-17, he has to have a note on here if he does not have professional liability insurance.
Okay.
And I don't see a note that it says he's not on there.
I don't think he cares if he does, if he don't.
I'm just stating what the law says.
And our concern is even if he has professional liability insurance, our client winds up having to litigate against an insurance company that doesn't want to let go of that.
Plus his time.
And plus his time and expense and instead of being able to be in the home. Because it is their home, it's not like it's a spec house or anything.
It's
It's
fine.
their
Right.
residence.
Mr. Miller, you quiet?
The professionals do the talking.
Well, it bothers me, as y'all probably.
I understand.
More than what you think.
You would not agree with us that we could subpoena Mr. Volker and get him here, you wouldn't give us 30 days?
My point with Mr. Volker is, when I met with Mr. Volker at the time, January 6th, when I left Aaron at the planning office and went over there, his statement to me was that document was reviewed before earlier at the county, and they approved it. They didn't catch it. I don't agree with that. I mean, as far as, I'm, like I said, a novice builder of homes, but common sense would tell me that, I should have reviewed it. But, so they had the document. He said it had been reviewed, and from that point, that's where I'm here, today as far as
So,
speaking.
Mr. Leach, your position is that Mr. Volker is saying it's the county's fault for not catching it?
Basically, yes.
Who set the elevation marks on the site?
Mr. Volker.
We have some exhibits to that if we could get to that.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Thank you.
You got some pictures of it?
Yes, sir.
That's what I want to see.
Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Melissa.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Leach.
Would you like me to stay or sit down, sir?
Sit right there.
Okay.
We have some other exhibits. I honestly am just going to move through those, just tell you about them. Specifically, the letter from the county about his request, and that he is, even though he is below the freeboard, he meets the FEMA standard, and also that he's more than well. It's at 6.6 6.8. He has a new elevation certificate with the surveyor who's here to explain that to you that shows he's at 6.8, and that so he meets FEMA standard, but he is more than willing to bring it up to 7, so it's a full 7 finished floor elevation if you choose to agree with the variance.
I have a question. So the 1 foot above is strictly a county requirement, an ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't affect us in terms of our rates, which is what the agreement with the county is.
It
which
will
is why we
increase
set that.
Right. It will increase his insurance and his alone. Mr.
If he can get it.
I'm sorry?
If he can get it.
He can get it. We have verification. We don't have it here for the meeting, but he can get it. They've already approved him.
And there's no bank, so it's not an issue. He doesn't have to carry insurance.
Right. But Mr.
Craker.
With the building, with the floodplain manager, talked to the administrator of the CRS program, the state CRS program, and in the conversation that I had with him, that this is not going to impact, this particular variance is not going to impact the CRS program. If the county did it more often, did it all the time, and was willy-nilly with it, it might cause a problem, but a variance is appropriate in some cases. I wanted to, let me get to some of the things that you seem to be asking about, and I want to get to that. Now, unfortunately, with the little bit of a storm that we've had just before the hearing tonight, some of my capabilities faltered. So I'm going to have to hand out one. It's my original, sadly, and I'll hand it out, and you'll have to share. This exhibit is particularly a picture of the foundation as it's being put together. And across the property, it's across the property, you can see where you can look very closely and see where he put it in the pole. He put a benchmark in the pole, in the foam pole. Later, when they came back, there is a picture, and directly under that, this is our exhibit 2.3, there is a picture where there is the pin, and then there's another pin 1 foot higher. We would like to point out that the pins look slightly different, only in that the one that is further down is torn and old, and not old like years old, but old like the wind has whipped the tag. The one to the north of that, which is only, higher than that 1 foot, is a fresh tag. It's a fresh piece of tape tied to it, the orange tape. We have some nice glossies to give you an idea. And you can look and see, in particular, it's very hard to see, but you can look and see there's one orange flag on it. And then you can see, when you pull it up, this is the one that was taken later where there's 2 orange flags a foot apart.
How far apart were the pictures taken? I mean, in time-wise?
Between December and February. No. December, a year. They were taken a year apart. The description on here explains when they got the invoice and when they took the picture. We also, I'm going to hand this out.
Did Mr. Volker put both of those points in?
Miss Vivian was telling me that you have those in your packet. You have some copies of those pictures.
Who put the points in, Alyssa?
Sir?
Who put the point? Mr. Volker?
Mr. Volker or his company.
Put both of them?
Yes, sir. Well, we know that he billed for the one that he put in. The other one is in there, and he will not admit to putting the other one in, but it's the only other one. It wasn't there in the beginning.
It doesn't have his stamp or anything on it? Or?
Well,
I don't know the answer to that. But
the lower one has a tag, has a disc on it. But you can't read what LB numbers on it.
in addition,
see that tag right there? So he only reported his so you can see it right there.
in addition to my next exhibit is an affidavit by Eric Hellerstedt. Is that in your packet already? I didn't think so. Hellerstedt, with regard to the construction of the building and the benchmarks, and another affidavit from Nelson of Joey Nelson from ADCO involved also in the building of it, and the survey pins that are the markers. There's 2 separate affidavits. This one, I just wanted to see them.
Mr. Hillerstedt is also here this evening if you have any questions that you would like to address to him.
These are 2 affidavits from...
One's from Mr. Hillerstedt, and the other one's from Mr. Nader. I'm going to also give you a picture of what the house looks like now, and or in the last picture that we had, which I don't know if you have that in your packet.
We do.
And then the newest is the elevation certificate by Mr. Kent Stewart of Seaside Engineering, Seaside LLC, or Seas LLC, with the new elevation as it is with his more advanced technical stuff of 6.8 feet rather than the 6.4 feet. As we mentioned earlier, we have the engineer here because our critical question was, can we fix it without having to go to the variance board? Can we, in some cases, and some of you may remember or not, that many years ago, an individual came to us about a modular home that they had installed that was below the finished floor elevation, and they wanted to know whether or not it was below the 1 foot freeboard, whether or not they could get a variance. At the time, the ordinance that we have today was not adopted, and it was a little bit more complex. What they did, though, was they went out, because it was a modular home, is they lifted the house up and put, raised it up and put it on a foundation. The problem here is we can't do that. And the engineer will speak to that you can't go underneath it and lift it up. And in addition to that, pouring an additional foot of concrete inside the house has its own complications. And then one of the final things you were asking about the NFIP and the CRS. I wanted to give you an excerpt from a few things. Specifically, these are from the building code, the very last line, talking in flood hazard areas. This is from section 110, inspections in the building code. In flood hazard areas, upon placement of the lowest floor, including basement, and prior to further vertical construction, the elevation certificate shall be submitted to the authority having jurisdiction. They turned in an elevation certificate.
My head's spinning a little bit, but I'm fine.
From the new surveyor.
Melissa, I think that I'm going to speak for the board. It's up to them to correct me. They haven't once tonight. I think you presented your case really well. I think we would like to hear from the staff. And I think, that unless I'm reading this thing wrong, that you're in good shape. If I didn't think so, I would continue. But I think that if we could hear from the staff, we can move this along. You do a very good job.
Thank you, sir.
First, I'd caution you not to jump to conclusions because we haven't even said a word yet about this whole thing. I'm going to ask Aaron Krecker to come up and kind of explain to you guys the process and what he has done with this particular case. And then I want to speak about the CRS program and how it works and how the county is involved in this CRS program and when you get points taken away. Aaron?
I'm Aaron Krecker. I'm the floodplain manager for the Walton County. Just a few facts that were missed during the presentation. The foundation was in place by the time they came to us for permitting. That's why the foundation survey shows that there is a foundation on the ground, and the elevation was 6.86, I believe.
Aaron, was that foundation put there without a permit?
I believe so. There was no permit pulled for the foundation until this came to us. In the elevation certificate that was dated 2/25, you can actually see in the pictures that there is a footer in the ground at the time. We opened a code case because they cleared their bay shoreline buffer, and they did a subsequent less than minor to do a preservation plan to replant the areas that they cleared that they shouldn't have cleared. So that was the time gap between the time they submitted and the time that we issued the permit, was the time they resolved the less than minor and the code case.
Back to my first question about this drawing, because it's something that actually concerns me in general. Is this bigger or smaller than actual size, or about right?
Volker will not sign or stamp anything less than the 24 by 36 size, I believe.
Okay.
We used this survey as a site plan for our review purposes to make sure that the foundation is meeting setbacks and things of that nature.
So is this part of the elevation review? But you had an elevation certificate.
Yeah, we have the elevation certificate,
and
which
it was a proposed structure.
And this is
not an actual structure, not a flood review, not a flood elevation review.
Well, it was a flood review. We have the elevation certificate. That's what we use to establish what the elevation will be. That's the construction drawing stage.
But you wouldn't have reviewed the survey because that foundation wouldn't have been there for a flood review, or am I?
Well, the foundation was there.
Did you know that?
In this case, we knew it when we saw the elevation certificate.
Do you know why we have the 1 foot higher standard than the state does?
It's a higher regulatory standard that the county adopted. It affords us points in the CRS system, the community rating system. We're at class 6 as of last year. It affords about $1 million discount in flood premiums for the entire county for people in the flood hazard areas. With this higher regulatory standard, we get extra points, and we get the benefit of saving people money by making them build a little bit higher.
So what would the impact be of allowing this one deviation?
Let me explain a little bit too. First of all, the county has not always been a part of the CRS program. That's relatively new in the past 3 years. The county has been barred from that, is my understanding, because there have been issues out there where we have structures below the base flood elevation and below the county requirements. CRS is the community rating system. It's a FEMA-sponsored program. And basically, if you're a CRS community, you get, as Aaron mentioned, you get ratings 10 down to a 1 or a 0. The lower your score, the lower your rating, the more flood insurance discounts you get if you have flood insurance. When they come in and set your level, they come in and see what you're doing. They want to see what your standards are. What are you doing to protect the flood zone and protect structures in the flood zone? The higher your standards, the lower your score is, and that correlates to the lower your flood insurance premium is, and the more points you get, the lower your community rating system number is, and then that means corresponding lower insurance for all those people who are involved who have flood insurance. We work very, very hard to be able to participate in the community rating system. 3 years ago, I think we finally were admitted to that program. And we feel like that anything we do, if you read the letter in your packet, I believe he said, the individual from Tallahassee says that this won't kick you out of the program, so we won't be disassociated with the CRS program, but it may cost you points when they come back and reevaluate our flood insurance. This is why it's very important to us we maintain our flood insurance, we maintain our standards. It's a bit unusual to ask for a deviation from the flood insurance standards, from our flood damage prevention ordinance standards, primarily because protecting one individual can cost a lot of people potentially higher flood insurance premiums, potentially. Now, this is one isolated case, yes. What does this mean for someone else who doesn't want to elevate? They don't want to elevate at the flood zone, or they have some other kind of problem. We feel like this could open the door and precedent for other people to come in and start asking for deviations from the flood insurance program. And for that, that's why we feel very strongly about this. And so
Can I interrupt you?
Yes,
You
sir.
said that this is a CRS program, yet their standard is a foot lower than our county standard elevation?
That the FEMA standard, and Aaron can probably answer better than I can, but again, that freeboard, that 1 foot freeboard, gives us additional points.
So that's my next question. So did you make that higher standard so you get more points?
Well, it's always been that way, but that does give us additional points, which allows our insurance premiums to be lower.
Wait, when you say our insurance program, insurance premiums, who do you mean by our?
I mean anybody that has flood insurance in Walton County.
Not the county.
But because the community is the county. That's the community. When they speak of the community rating system and the points, if you're in Okaloosa, they have a different program in Okaloosa, and if you're in Bay County, if they participate, they have a different community rating number than we have.
I just want to make sure I understand that the county itself, the government of the county, is not in any way participating in this. This is strictly the community at large that you're talking about.
It's those individuals who have flood insurance, and those are the primary beneficiaries of a lower community rating system number, and which again corresponds to lower insurance premiums on your flood insurance.
Wayne, do you actually honestly feel that an error like this that the home builder is suffering would unleash a flood of other requests?
I guess the question that comes to mind is, I mean, they're trying to blame the county for this. I'm not sure if that's exactly accurate.
I don't think they are.
And I'd like Aaron to potentially expand upon that, because the county gets blamed a lot for things and come to you and ask for variances because this happened or that happened. Many times it's not actually correct, and there's a lot of things that probably you don't hear the side of the story that needs to be told. But
well, Wayne, I asked the question before, was it Mr. Volker who's blaming the county? And the answer was yes. And I don't get the sense that the appellant here is blaming the county. It's that they have been victimized by someone who apparently didn't do his job properly.
Well, no matter how it happens, I mean, I perceive it as somebody blaming us when it's ultimately their responsibility. And I think Aaron can explain to you how our process works as far as elevation certificates and when they have to be performed and so forth. And so, I feel a little bit, I'm a little getting a little tired of being attacked. And this has happened quite a few times over the years. And that's not, I'll say this, we have a very, very hardworking staff, and it frustrates me and angers me, significantly when that happens.
Mr. Dice,
Yes.
I sympathize with your anger and your frustration. It's created by surveyors that is not held responsible for their inaccuracy on the survey.
Right.
The bottom line of this, it is not your issue, it's not your problem.
Right.
Unfortunately,
It's not
the
your
planning department started making every person have a survey. And we continue to have surveyors surveying inaccurate. That will not come in defense. So tell us how.
But Mr. Chairman, I will tell you this, and that may be the case. My perception is a little differently, and I'm going to defend our people because they work very hard. We've got a very, very good staff, and every time somebody tries to take a chip at you, you're chipping away at credibility, which is very important to me and very important to them. And I agree with you. It may be somebody else's problem, but I'm going to defend our people as much as I can.
With all due respect, there's nobody up here attacking your staff for this error that the surveyor has made.
No, there was a strong insinuation that we were going to be hearing about the county's part on this, and I disagree wholeheartedly. This has many faults in it, but I really don't see the county's part in it because
I don't either.
Well, I want to know, how can we help you get this surveyor's attention?
Mr. Chairman, I wish I had an answer for you. I'm not in the surveying business. I don't know the rules and regulations
Hang on.
around surveying.
Can we file can the board or can the county file with the state to take his license for his unprofessional demeanor that he wanted to come and defend it?
Mr. Chairman, I had to defer to someone who has more knowledge in that area and as far as the surveying board and how they do things, because I certainly do not know how they discipline a member of their board when it's been determined that they have acted inappropriately.
You have a code enforcement. You have a code enforcement
We
board
do.
that is on this case. Is that correct?
True, that's correct. There's been a code case against us.
And yet you allow the code enforcement to bring it here without a subpoena and the person that charges, that causes it. Can we request?
Well, first from the staff, we present cases to the code board. So we don't have any, the code board and staff are different entities. Staff doesn't have the authority to subpoena anyone. If there's a subpoena from the code board, that has to come from the code board. We can't require anybody to be here just because staff asks for it. And that's something the code board would have to ask.
We haven't discussed this further, but let's get back to the case.
Yeah, before we get too far, I've actually spoken with Aaron about something similar, and actually with Jason as well. FEMA has several methods for compliance. It is not strictly having the structure at an elevation. There is options for armoring, there's options for berming, there's options galore. Is any of that a possibility, since it's a predominantly masonry structure, and it's not a VE zone? There's other ways to do it.
And Mr. Bailey, I will tell you, we would be in favor of any other way that's not going to somehow jeopardize the county's participation and the community's rating, the county's rating in the community rating system. If there's another way, we absolutely would not in any way object to that at all. What we are concerned about is any kind of variance that may decrease our ability to participate in the community rating system and also our ability to keep our score low in turn, which means savings to the citizens of Walton County.
Does the CRX system allow for the FEMA approved methods for floodproofing?
I'll let Aaron answer that.
So floodproofing is typically reserved for non-residential structures, churches, commercial buildings, things that are not going to be inhabited by people that are living there day to day. Our floodplain ordinance doesn't address floodproofing. FEMA designates floodproofing for non-residential structures only, unless it's a historical building.
Really?
Yes.
They only have one guide there, and it doesn't say that explicitly. It didn't even apply it from the one I saw. In fact, I saw it was a document that was called Floodproofing for Residential Structures.
And Tony, if that's a desire that the board wants to pursue, we would be more than happy to contact the appropriate entities and discuss that with them as far as how that may affect or so forth our participation. And if, for example, if we want to continue this, we could check into that for the next meeting and bring back some information that may answer those questions for you.
Okay. But from your research, this would not affect us directly. This one would not tip us to the point where we would be. I mean, because I know that we've actually got a program where we're improving a number a year. We have a certain amount of funding available, and we improve some.
The letter is in your packet from I forget his name.
To Mr. Henson.
Mr. Henson, and he says that if you read the letter, it says that it will not jeopardize your participation in the program. It may cost you points in the program, and those points again are important to us because the more points you have, lower your score, lower your insurance ratings. I would hate to. I know from my perspective, and I'm not the floodplain manager, but that's going to be Aaron. But I'd hate to jeopardize many for one. That to me doesn't seem quite adequate.
Does the improvements to other structures count in our favor? In other words, if we grant this one, has it been offset by? Because I know we've improved at least one, if not a couple, this year.
You know, the way the point system is gathered, basically they go through our code and they see what are we doing. What are we get points for having a higher standard. That's where the free board comes from. If they go out and they look and they come and do surveys, they will come and do a community survey and see, and they'll go look. I mean, I think before in the past, I've heard of communities who had things that didn't meet it, and that really cost them. They'll go out and do surveys and determine, if we're following that. Whether they see this or not, who knows? But I guess
they'll drop the whole community.
Well, but they look for one that
They
doesn't
will.
have
They'll
the
drop it.
Right. And now I'm speaking for Mr. Henson. His letter is in the packet. An email to Aaron is in the packet. You can read what he says. I'm summarizing that when he says that it wouldn't cost you your participation in the system, in the CRS system, but it may cost you points, and that's in the packet, and you can read what he says from his own words that he wrote. I'm just summarizing that for you, but it's in the packet. And that's when I see that letter like that coming from someone in the state that does have a role in the CRS program, it does cause me great concern when I see that.
If we do not approve this, he doesn't get his CO, he can't move in?
Until he complies with our regulations, no, he cannot.
So you're basically suggesting we deny it, and he's forced into a battle with the surveyor to tear the house down and rebuild it to the elevation.
I guess what I would suggest is rather than denying it, Mr. Valley, who is well versed in this as an architect, he knows some of these techniques and standards. I would like to potentially explore some other opportunities that he may have that would satisfy, that and would not cost us points in the CRS program. I would like some time to explore those. If there's any out there, I would like to know if there's another method we could do, like you mentioned, with some of the, some of the techniques that are used for commercial buildings or what have you. I would like to look at that if it's possible here. I mean, again, we would not object to that at all. We don't want to be, shutting jobs down, and we don't want to be hard on people, but we do feel like we have a responsibility to the county and to the citizens who participate in the flood insurance program to make sure that we don't do things or even recommend things that may cost us in the future, when tonight it may not seem like anything, but over time it may. And so that's what we are concerned about.
I guess I struggle, though, if we allow this, you're not changing your standards. This is one deviation that's been granted. You're not in any way changing the standard that you.
That's true. But with that, I think my concern is that if we do it this time, and I'm not aware if we've ever done this before.
This is the first.
This is the first time, I think. I mean, what are we going to open the door to others? And and then when you if you read the letter, I think the more and more you get, the more problematic it becomes. And so at what point will we draw the line, say no more? That's my concern.
Wait, aside from possibly opening the door to other issues, let's just stick to this one. In your opinion, and I know you can't speak for CRS, but in your opinion, is granting this variance going to significantly alter the rating system? Or are we talking about 1 in 1,000?
Right. Mr. Miller, I'm not an expert in that, in how they evaluate communities, because I've never done a community evaluation for a CRS before. I will tell you that I'm only reading the letters that they wrote us, and the letters say that this won't jeopardize your participation, but it may cost you points. And then that's exactly from the letter that's in your book, and that's the only thing I can speak to.
Forget the analogy, but
Right.
it's sort of like a baseball player. If he's up 500 times during the year and he strikes out once, it's going to affect his batting average, but not significantly.
Right.
So that's what I'm asking. Is one deviation going to have a category change, or is it going to have a significant difference, or are we talking about 0.001?
Now, how many points do we have right now?
I'm not sure. That's something we've got to go back and look at our checks. And I would mention one other thing, and I think that Mac brought up a minute ago. To receive a variance, I know we've talked a lot about how we got to this point, but there are very clear standards in our land development code where you have to meet a variance, and it talks about good faith and sufficient cause, unique characteristics, those kind of things. I think it's very important that if this is the case, we need to identify what the unique circumstances are that we should grant a variance for. And so that would deviate from the flood damage prevention ordinance. I think it's very, very important that we at least establish those.
I have a couple questions. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. One, if this variance is granted, I believe that makes them in compliance, so therefore they'd be able to add, modify, expand, do changes over time.
I'll defer to Aaron on that one. I'm not sure.
Being that this is the first one, I'm not sure how that would be viewed. We would essentially be granting a variance from the freeboard requirement, and they would be in compliance with the FEMA flood insurance study elevation, which is 6.7 feet.
What about just from a planning department standpoint? Since it's been granted a variance, that means that they are in compliance. So they're not a non-compliant structure.
Right. If you grant a variance to it, then that relieves any deviation from the code that they may have, and we would accept that as if it was a normal building that was met code.
Okay. Other question. Existing structures that some that have been purchased. One of the I spoke with Aaron about. Is this creating and this is the open endorsement situation, because I think that does matter. There's a lot of structures that aren't compliant right now. Those structures have a significant hardship because a lot of the structures were bought and people didn't even realize that. They have a real hardship because actually they're a non-compliant structure, so they actually can't expand. They actually have a greater limitation upon them.
And those could potentially come in and ask for a variance too.
So literally anyone.
Let's get this issue here and not worry about any other issues so we can get this thing. I want to know, when did they start the construction? You said that they built the slab without a permit. Is that what you said?
Yes. I don't know when they started building that structure. We noticed it on the elevation certificate that there were footers in place in the picture, and they're coming to us to get a permit, so they obviously didn't have a permit yet to do those footers.
Did they go and have their prior meeting before any construction with y'all?
Not that I know. What meeting are you referring to?
So it's your testimony that they just went out there and started building a house?
To the best of my knowledge, they started building a foundation without permits.
And then they called for elevation, and that's when y'all found there was not a permit?
Well, they came in to get a permit. So they came to the planning department to get planning approval for a permit.
For the slab?
For the house.
After the slab was poured?
Not after. There were footers in the ground. I don't know when they poured the slab. On the foundation, on the elevation certificate that was presented, the construction drawing one, it was the same date as the foundation survey that's in front of you that we used as a site plan for the approval of the house.
All that was in place?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah. So you're saying, and this is the preliminary I'm looking at here, on February the 25th, that the the footers for the foundation were in the ground?
I believe if you flip to the back page of that elevation certificate, there are pictures, and you'll be able to see the date of those pictures and that there are structures in the ground.
And they went... You can't really tell, but I'll take your word for it. But what I'm getting at is, on February the 25th,
Plumbing stacks and rebar.
oh, okay, I see it in the back right there. Okay. But anyway, they wanted to get a permit at that point in time?
Yes.
And the date of the foundation's on the 5th, I think, or the 2nd. So the foundation, according to the survey, was done at the 1st of the month. The flood cert was done on the 25th. And the county just, in June, brought it to everybody's attention. Is that the right timeline?
Oh, well, they submitted the permit, I believe, in February. I'd have to look at the...
Where's the one Kent did? Let me see that one, the latest one.
I believe on Leach Exhibit 1, they submitted the permit on February 25th to be reviewed.
As long as they can dig the footer, they can pour the footer, they can do their septic, all of that, as long as they don't pour the slab and get it inspected. Is that correct?
No, they're supposed to, before they start any construction, they're supposed to have a building permit in hand.
Not anymore, because we came in, not even supposed to clear.
Can our client speak to the timeline of events?
We will.
Why he went forward?
We will. We're just
Sure.
going to finish up with him, give you a chance to come back.
We used to be able to pour footers, but they did away with that because there's so much issue with clearing and setbacks.
Surveyors. Go ahead.
When did that change, Tom?
Yeah, I'll wait till we do a motion before I rant and rave.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I do got one.
Okay.
And this goes back to the CRS.
Okay.
You said that I hadn't read the email that you guys got and everything. You said that we might be dinged a couple points. Is that true, Wayne?
So the way they rate our points on a prorated system.
Right.
So for every elevation
I'm
certificate that is
familiar with
compliant, we
that.
get points. For every one that's not compliant, they take away points.
Right, but what's the word I'm looking for? What's the grace time to earn the points back?
Well, every year they come to us and we recertify that we're upholding our.
So they do it yearly then?
Yes. We submit elevation certificates to them every year. We submit all final elevation certificates to them every October.
How many elevations would you be submitting normally?
I think last year during our recertification we submitted a little less than 200.
May I read a section of the letter from Mr. Henson? I mean, we've talked about it a lot, and it's in your book. Let me In the second paragraph, he says, really, there are two issues, but first, the CRS, as you requested. When ISO conducts the CRS visits, they rely on the ECs, the elevation certificates, to document your implement freeboard. So when the ISO specialist reviews your ECs, they will prorate the freeboard credit for this property by total sample. You may see points reduction to the FRB credit, but this one house will not jeopardize your participation in the CRS program. And so what they're saying again is that this won't get us kicked out, but you potentially could see reduction of points. That's straight from his letter, from his email. I'll read the last paragraph if you just don't hate to belabor it a little, but I'll read it. He said, the other issue is NFIP compliance with your ordinance. A variance after the fact does not look good on the floodplain management program. If this is the only one, you will most likely not have an issue. Having said that, if there are additional violations beyond the FRB, and should a state NFIP coordinator or FEMA conduct a CAV, which is a community assisted visit, they will assess the program, and that is where they can remove CRS participation. It has happened to other communities based on severity of violations. I guess another point I should make is 1 foot of freeboard offers a homeowner close to a 40% reduction in flood insurance, plus your 20% for being in the CRS, basically.
Say that again. What's the percentage reduction in insurance?
40% for freeboard for the homeowner, and plus the 20% discount you get for the county participating in the CRS program. And he goes on to say, I hope all these factors will be considered by the variance board in making the decision. Hope this helps. And they'll wait for Sherry Harper, who is the ISO coordinator, her input.
Is Mr. Hanson the gentleman that can answer if there's alternative to what Tony was talking about? Is that the man you would speak with?
There are several people from the state that we can contact regarding alternatives for compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Henson would be one of them, yes.
You can have a seat. Who would like to come, Melissa or?
Did Mac? Time? Yeah. Okay.
Max?
Mac, I'm sorry, I didn't see Mac over there. He has something to say.
Thank you, Board. Matt Carpenter from the Planning Department. I'd just like to read something into the record. And this is from Walton County Land Development Code, Section 4.05.08, subsection H, conditions for issuance of the variance. There are specific conditions spelled out that you must make a positive finding in order to grant the variance. Number one, submission by the applicant of a showing of good and sufficient cause that the unique characteristics of the size, configuration, or topography of the site limit compliance with the provisions of the ordinance or the required elevation standards. Number two, determination by the Walton County Board of Adjustments that subsection A, failure to grant the variance would result in exceptional hardship due to the physical characteristics of the land that render the lot undevelopable. Increased costs to satisfy the requirements or inconvenience do not constitute a hardship. Section B, the granting of the variance will not result in increased flood heights, additional threats to public safety, extraordinary public expense, nor create nuisances, cause fraud on or victimization of the public, or conflict with the existing laws and ordinances. And C, the variance is the minimum necessary considering the flood hazard to afford relief. But I go back to number one. Failure to grant the variance would result in exceptional hardship due to the physical characteristics of the land that render the lot undevelopable.
That
This is
strictly
not
applies to the land, though, doesn't it?
That's right, a hardship of the land, and these are the positive findings that you must make in order to grant a variance.
Thank you.
In accordance with the code. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm David Leach, homeowner and builder. Timeline. I have two houses. I built one in 2005 at 136 Casa Grande Lane. It was built 8 foot. Everything was perfect. I didn't use Mr. Volker as a surveyor. I sold that house in about 2 years ago. We were supposed to close on it in December of 2014. I submitted my building permit application to the county in December of 2014. we were supposed to be out of the house that was on Casa Grande, which is literally 150 feet from the new lot on Paradise Point. And so I was in a time crunch to get started. So I spoke to Mr. Billy Bearden and got permission to do my footer, to dig my footers and to get it inspected by Mr. Newell, Mike Newell, my engineer, so that we could proceed, and then Mr. Billy Bearden gave us permission to do that. I have a footers inspection report from my engineer, Mike Newell. And that is the reason that we started that house, or started building the foundation before the permit. I didn't know it was going to take till July to get the permit, but we talked to Mr. Bearden and got permission to do the footers. I have an inspection from Mr. Newell, and that's what started the early part of this phase to when we started the house. I was in a crunch to get out of the one and get into the other one. So that's what the early part was.
There has been discussion to continue this to see if there's an alternative to this other than granting the variance. How do you feel about that? Even though it's a deal as far as where we're at, but we're in a financial part of troubles to get this house done, to get it moved into, because I've got to pay back some life insurance loans and so on and so forth that we took out to get money back. So it's a hardship to me to take the time to get into that point, into the house. That's basically, it is a hardship to me to wait, but I'm just telling you how I feel as far as that goes. We're asking.
All right, gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Ms. Leach? Melissa, do you want to add anything?
We have witnesses that had the affidavits. If you had any questions of these people are involved in the building process, that speak specifically to the surveying benchmarks and their placement. And let me say too, on the record, the intent of our presentation was not to say the building department or the planning department did anything wrong. It is to say that he was going through the process, and to the best of his ability, he was asking for permission to do things, and he was trying to do it the right way. The bringing up the foundation survey was simply, we don't know what happened here, but it's pertinent to look at it and say whether or not it's an issue. The only person or entity that Mr. Leach blames for this, truly, is that the surveyor put a benchmark in, and they went on with their construction as they thought they were permitted to do. And they did not, and this is a 2-year process, as you heard him testify, from 2014 until January of this year, before he's notified that he is not meeting his requirement for his finished floor elevation. And why this is critical is because that's after the house has already got walls and a roof and stucco and things going on that you cannot just easily repair. We have the engineer here to testify as to what would happen and try to fix that problem. If you're going to continue to look for another solution, then maybe we save his testimony until we look and see whether or not those things impact him adversely, impact the property or the neighbors or anything. Another thing, just to put in before we have the people come up and answer your questions about the surveying benchmarks, which is critical to this conversation, and we know that, is that the NFIP program, the information that we got off of the FEMA website, clearly states there are some things that you have to meet for the county to be able to look at giving you a variance. And I have an exhibit we'll be able to turn in, but one of the things it mentions is that your contiguous neighbors are built below the base flood elevation. His neighbor is at 6 feet because it pre-existed the time whenever they were looking at the finished floor elevation and the flood ordinance was in place. So that's pertinent to let you know that they are meeting that requirement. It's not because they want to, it's because it's a fact. And that another requirement is that if they are meeting the base flood elevation, the question is, are they going to be harmful to the neighbors if you give him the variance from the finished floor, from the 1-foot freeboard? He meets the base flood elevation, and his any damage to his home would be his own, and he wouldn't cause any additional damage to the neighbors because it's not going to add, and I'm talking about if there's a flood event. So we're not talking about a house that's going to be underwater. We're talking about a house that's finished floor is going to be at the proposed, the base flood elevation. So to step into that, according to what the FEMA guidelines say in that particular handout from FEMA's website, is that if these things are in place, then you have the ability to even consider them for a variance, and they are in place. If you want to, we'd be glad to call the men that worked on the crew to come up and talk to you about the surveying issue.
Sure, let's make it quick. Let's try to.
Is Ken here?
Let's try
Ken's here,
to.
and he'd like to talk to you about the surveying issue questions you have.
Let's try to move this along. Okay.
Let me just have 1 minute to
Sure.
address the CRS program. Unlike Mr. Dice, I have worked for cities and counties that have had CRS audits. Generally speaking, they only consider that a elevation certificate is not compliant if there hasn't been a variance asked for and approved. All you have to do is attach the variance to the elevation certificate to show that, we caught it. We did require them to go and satisfy the requirements for a variance. The floodplain ordinance that FEMA recommends has variance language in it. They understand that there are times when you have to grant variances. That does not generally impact your CRS credits at all.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. State your name for the record. Were you sworn?
Just the man I'm looking for.
My name is Kent Stewart. I'm a Seaside Engineering and Surveying, and I have been sworn in.
All right, one thing I need to know. When you went out there after the fact, if you looked at, have you seen what Ron's?
Yes, I have.
You've seen Ron's elevations, right?
Yes,
you
I have.
know he used an Opus solution.
Yes, I did.
And you're using the Tidal benchmark.
Yes, I am.
And they're both at 6.8.
No, he's at 6.6 something.
We're close.
We're close. Yeah,
We're close.
we're close.
So is it your opinion that the benchmark, the original one that they used to put the foundation in?
Yeah, I don't know which one he used because he didn't mention it on his elevation certificate. It is required that you
Right.
do show. He says Opus. Opus.
Oh, I know.
If we do an Opus, we show which ones were used for the solution
Okay.
on the elevation certificate.
But I'm talking about the benchmark on the pole. Did you
The benchmark on the pole.
That's
I
what I'm
shot
talking
I shot the one that is at the top.
The one on the top.
The one on the top.
And you still came up with 6.8.
And no, well, I came up with. I set my own benchmark on the property, which I GPSed. I leveled off of mine, hit the finished floor, came up with 6.8 feet. I leveled over to the benchmark on the pole, the one on the top, and came up with 8.19. It was supposed to be set at 8. I'm assuming.
Right.
The one that's below it was bent, so I there's no reason to really shoot
But
it.
it's still about 16 inches.
It's about 16 inches lower. If I was to guess, I would say that it very nearly matches the finished floor of the house.
That's what I thought.
As far as, if you don't mind, if I can address your question a minute ago, whether or not the board can file a grievance or file something against Mr. Volker with the state of Florida, yes, you can. Anybody can file against any surveyor. It doesn't matter if you're a person, a corporation, or in this case, the Walton County. Anybody can file a grievance against Mr. Volker.
So Mr. Leach could file?
Mr. Leach can file, and my company has filed.
Okay.
And we have filed, yes, we have. And we toyed with the fact of doing it anonymously, and we decided not to. So we submitted all the paperwork. We have followed Mr. Volker many times and have found many problems. And so we thought it was our
Professional obligation.
yes,
To
exactly.
protect the integrity of your.
That's right, to
profession.
protect, yeah, because
And what
we
Ken
take it
said-
very, very seriously what we do.
Yeah, what Ken said is true, and it is his and mine. It's our professional duty to turn in any land surveyor that we see fit that harms the public.
Yeah,
And
and if it hadn't been a repetitive thing, everyone makes mistakes. We're all fallible. I mean, I'm not going to say that I've never made a mistake on anything, but it's that repetitive nature of the mistake. That's the problem, and that's where and like I said, we soul searched before we did this, because it's not. I don't want anybody turning me in, and we really
Something has to be done.
Well, it is, and what Ken is saying is true, because to do that, you're not only affecting him, you're affecting his family.
Yes.
And to turn somebody in can be detrimental. I mean, it's a serious issue, and there's a lot of people out there.
But another thing to say there is you're right in that we have to think about his family. But as surveyors, our first responsibility is to the public.
To the public. That's right.
That is our first responsibility, not to my client, not to another surveyor, to the public. I have to protect the public in everything I do.
Thank you.
May I just clarify one thing?
Yes.
Go back to your testimony there. You were talking surveyor language there. Would you net that out for me? What's the bottom line of what you said with all of those various options that you two were talking in code?
One is 6, 1, 8, another is 8 feet.
Yeah, but what's the conclusion that he's coming to from that? I know there was
My
a difference,
conclusion
but his
is that there was a benchmark set originally, and it was erroneously set, and that whenever they went back to do the finished floor elevation, they found the error. I'm not sure that Mr. Velker knew about it until that point, but
now you use the active voice, so you said it was said. Who said it?
I'm assuming Mr. Velker.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Because he invoiced for it.
Okay.
That's a clue.
So your conclusion then is that
is a clue.
That Mr. Velker erred at the outset.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Anybody else? We're going to bring it. Make it quick. Yes, sir. State your name for the record.
My name's Eric Hellerstedt. I'm a colleague and consultant for Hellerstedt. As I said, I'm a friend and colleague of Mr. Leach. I was basically assisting him in acquiring subcontractors, and the foundation people were one of them. They come highly regarded, work around 30A in watercolor, and they do this every day. So I observed them do the layout and helped them, assisted them with the layout and the initial foundation. So I was there and observed one benchmark in the telephone pole, and that's all there was.
And this is part of the same thing as that affidavit
yes,
you got
sir.
in there? Okay.
Like I said, I can't add much to this thorough investigation here, but I can attest to the fact that there was one, and the fellows that put in the foundation went by that one.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And it would be quite a consequence that it seems to be exactly 16 inches, which would be 2 blocks off. So that would be too coincidental to happen just by chance.
Well, that's what, when I saw that 16 inches in my mind,
Right.
I was thinking 2 blocks
Right.
and a half inch or more.
Well, plus the fact, I asked them from experience. I've been building here for 15 years, and in Georgia, I'm retired, but in 30 years in Georgia as a GC, I instructed them where to put that pin. Because that was going to be one pole on. You usually choose a spot on the lot that won't ever be moved, or can't go up or down, or be affected by people grading and so forth. So it can't be moved or affected by equipment. So I asked them to put it on that pole. So when it was on the pole, we all knew where it was, and it was this. Another coincidental thing was, the same exact type pin was put in a year later with the same ribbon. So,
did it have a red disc on it?
I don't recall a disc at all. It's been so long now, and I've been through so many more projects. I'm a commercial builder now over in Pensacola, but it would be Mr. Leach is a very busy condo builder and so forth, and I can't blame him for trusting the surveyor with the stamp on there and not really notice all this jargon and so forth, to just pass it along to the other trusted individuals at the department who are extremely busy and do a great job pushing all these things through. I can see where mistakes can happen by whomever, but Mr. Volker, I'm afraid, it sounds like to me, is using, he's also busy, is using subcontractors probably to do his work for him. And that could be why, and I'm glad you said that it could be a hardship on Mr. Volker, because I hate judging an individual that, you know, could be a great guy, but he's swamped, whatever, just like these guys are. They're trying their best, and he could have subbed it.
We need
Okay.
we need to move along.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, is that all you need?
That's all we need.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to say anything? Planning department, you want a summation? Melissa, you got 30 seconds.
I can tell you from having worked in other counties that the way the program generally runs, most places, you file 3 elevation certificates. You file a proposed when you get your building permit. You file an under construction at the time your foundation is finished to show that you've met the elevation. And then you file final when you get your final inspection and your CO. That way, if there's a problem, it's caught at the time that your foundation is finished. Apparently, Walton County doesn't do it that way. I don't blame them for, the error, but everybody here made errors. The problem is, this is where we are now. And the question is, what can we do to move this homeowner's house along, if there's a way to do that? His engineer is here. He's told us that there is every possibility that we could bring it up to 7 feet, which is the base flood elevation, so it would meet FEMA's requirements. But there's no way we could bring it up to the 8-foot freeboard without tearing the house down and starting over, which would be a 2-year, $500,000 process. To get Mr. Volker to pay for it, we would probably be looking at 2 years of litigation and God only knows how many attorney's fees. That doesn't seem like a rational solution to me. There is a provision in the code for variances. I think that we've shown hardship. I think we've shown that there was not any intent or bad faith on the part of the homeowner. He was just trying to build his house. Mr. Volker made mistakes. Everybody made mistakes. But the problem is we need a solution.
We fixed them, too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to close the public discussion.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion.
I want to make a motion to approve.
Second.
A second.
Discussion. Or?
What are our options other than to approve or not approve?
Okay, who made the motion, who made the second?
He made the motion, Scott seconded. The only other option, to my understanding, is for them to check with different ones in the state to see if there is an alternative to bring it up into compliance, as Tony spoke of.
And Aaron has said that that's mostly reserved for commercial, and I don't know if the program would recognize that. So it may be a waste of time, I don't know. But it is something that I'm looking into for other residences that are not in compliance, but that are existing, nothing under construction.
Well, what about the suggestion or the comment that it could possibly be brought up from 6.68 to 7 feet?
I believe it would need to be brought up to the 7.
We're planning on doing it.
Yeah, it has to be brought up to the 7. Otherwise, it would not comply with it.
Well, that needs to be in the variance, because I think it's the variance is, there's nothing that says in the variance request that they're going to bring it to 7, is it? Just says 6.8. So you need to make a motion that the approval of the variance, provided that it's brought up to the 7 foot.
Oh, wait a minute. I thought I got the understanding that the FEMA standard was you meet that that standard. So what do we get by adding 4 inches?
They need to get to 7
2
there,
and
not
3/8
at 7.
actually. It's
Do
six-
what?
It's 2 and 3/8 inches. We're at 6.8. 6.8 to 7.0 is 2 and 3/8 inches. We're going to do internal floor or framing up 2 and 3/8. We've already got a mark from Seaside
I got you.
Engineering to
Okay.
show the
I
height.
understand. Okay.
So you just put, well, we proposed it.
Okay,
I'm
I'll
with you.
modify my motion to grant it with the floor elevation brought up to 7 feet. Is that correct, sir?
Finish
correct.
floor elevation?
Yes.
Scott,
Well,
you gonna second that?
yeah, I'll second
Scott, how do you get an elevation certificate, which is what the county depends on as a document of record, which then gets reviewed as part of this program at 8, when you just sign and seal something which may or may not indicate that the floor is at 6.8, when it's saying pop-up block only, but it's a finished floor. I don't even know what that is.
I'm getting to that.
I don't even know what that is as a thing. It's not a thing.
I know. I'm
It's a
getting-
non-statement.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to say.
And it's ridiculous to even imply that the county should even look at that at all. Because
The,
that's not what they depend on. They depend on the elevation certificate.
Well, back in 2001 or 2002, we had a workshop, and we being the county, some of the surveyors, some of the engineers. We came, and we were actually right in here, and we had this big workshop about, back then, the county did not require foundation surveys. You know, they didn't require them at the time. But as you know, during the, and that was, everybody was getting busy and all that, and there was so much stuff slipping through the cracks that Greg and a bunch of them said, well, we need, and Melissa, you remember that. And, but I gotta get to this because it's gonna bring light on a lot of this stuff. So anyway, the whole deal with this workshop was, yes, we're gonna require builders to have foundation surveys prior to having the next permit. And that would alleviate people having finished floors below flood zone. And that was the whole deal with it. I was all for it, not because it was more money or anything, but there was more, it was easier on me, because as an owner, to do this, and it helped the county and the staff out, you know, as it went on. So anyway, that was the whole intent. And as you know, and this is a good example, somehow, Mr. Leach's building here just went through and somebody didn't see it. So what my whole point is on this is that, just like Lois said, that, you know, I don't think there's any one fault, any one person is at fault here. But as far as the board, and I'm going to bring this up, as far as the board talking about turning Mr. Volker into the board and all that, that's none of our business. That we don't need to get into that.
Let's do the motion.
Well, I know that, but that's up to Mr. Leach.
We're gonna discuss that.
You know, that's up to him to do that, I think. If that's the direction he wants to go to.
He answered your question? Any other discussion? Mr. Miller?
Yep.
We have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Miller, how you vote?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
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 You got your variance.
Thank you.
I totally disagree. I think because, you know, nobody's doing anything to stop it. And it continues to create difficult for this board and for the county. Who's going to stop it?
Well, sounds like Seaside's going
Next item on the agenda is going to be item number 4, Dermacos and Associates.
Kent, don't go nowhere. Don't go nowhere. All right.
Mr. Burgess, you want to come up?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Dean Burgess with Emerald Coast Associates. I have been sworn. I'm here to discuss the variance that's before you tonight for, I believe, let me get the name right, all the different names. The Eden Estate variance. And what I have is a packet of information that I'd like to hand out to each of you with exhibits Itemized A through G.
Yes, ma'am. There's more than one for everyone. There's 10 there. There should be 10 there.
Mr. Burke, just one minute. Excuse me, board, I'm missing 3 exhibits, I need them from the last. They had my exhibits.
That's not bad. That's one. Scott, the other one's the photo in front of you. and the other one's
2.7.
The elevation certificate.
There, you can have all this stuff.
Scott, put one in there. Wait, Scott, it's the second one. It's the one with paper.
In your left hand.
That one.
Well, what about these
I'm
right
missing
here?
one more that has my.
1.3?
That's it. She's got them all.
I wonder how he stays in business. I guess he just says the manager. There's a number of them. Bobby Hutchins is one of them. Doyle Elgin was one of them. He's John Johnson, the other band.
All right, I'm just waiting for the board to
Go ahead.
pass them around so everybody gets
What do we get
a
out
set
of
of
this?
exhibits. Excuse me?
What do we get? All of this?
Yeah, there's a stapled packet. Everybody gets one stapled packet. And there should be leftovers. Before I get into each of the exhibits, in general, what we're asking for is the owner of the property, Mr. Schufler, built a pizza oven on his property. If you turn to the back of the packet, you can see pictures of it. It's quite an elaborate, nice pizza oven and fire pit. And he did this as part of the construction of a small house on the property. The house, the pizza oven, and the boat dock were all constructed at the same time. Exhibit A in your packet, and I guess what we're here for is specifically the pizza oven. Turns out was constructed in the 25-foot wetland buffer, and we are seeking a variance to keep the pizza oven in its position. Exhibit A is basically just a general overview to familiarize with where in the county we're talking about. Dog Hobble Road in the center of the page is the road. It's off of County Highway 395 up by Eden. Exhibit B is the specific lot on which the pizza oven exists. You can see the small house in the center lower portion of the outlined lot in red. Exhibit C is our survey that we performed on the property. Circled in red is the actual location of the pizza oven, and you can see it's right in the 25-foot secondary wetland buffer. It's not in the wetlands themselves, it's in the buffer. The next item in your packet, Exhibit D, is the property appraiser's website, specifically 2/3 of the way down the page, indicating the year that the house was built was 2012. And that's important because, as we're aware, we had a code change and comprehensive plan change that occurred in 2012. And I think that has some significance in this particular instance.
You want to explain it?
Sure. Exhibit E goes into that, the specific differences in the code between what it reads, how it reads now, and how it read then. And what I have is Exhibit E is from the Land Development Code, Exhibit F is from the Comprehensive Plan, and I've highlighted in Exhibit E from the Land Development Code that within the secondary wetland buffer there were allowances, and there were allowances for 10% clearing within the buffer.
Currently, there are no allowances for clearing in the buffer. You basically can only construct boardwalks, shore normal through the buffer to access a dock. Similarly, in the comprehensive plan, the comp plan actually allowed a 25%. There was a discrepancy between the two. What I'm suggesting, of course, I wasn't around during the time of this, wasn't involved, but it appears the pizza oven got built. It's not part of a building permit. It specifically was not part of what was submitted for the building permit. They aren't subject to it, similar to the boat dock. The owner built his house. During the course of construction, obviously, there were county inspectors coming out. This clearly wasn't done on the sly or with hopes of not getting seen. There were inspectors coming to and from the property throughout the course of construction. The owner built it there, and whether it was in observance of the allowance for some impact of the buffer or whether it was purely out of ignorance that there shouldn't be things constructed in the buffer. I think there's a provision either way.
Mr. Burgess, let me interrupt you for a second.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you said it and I missed it. What's the time frame that we're talking about here? When was this building being done?
Well, the property appraisers they assign the date constructed to the building when it gets its CO. So presumably this was being built during 2010 and 11 and 12, 2011 and 2012, which is right when the code changes were happening. In 2012 is when the code change went into effect.
So that's when the pizza oven was built?
Pizza oven was built during the 2011-2012 time frame, yes, sir.
Are you sure about that? Are you sure about it?
Based on the property appraiser's record, and I have the owner here who can also speak to when it was constructed, I know that the property appraiser assigns the date built whenever the CO is issued. So clearly it was 2012 and prior. The last exhibits in there are pictures of the pizza oven, and you can see it's more than just a simple structure. One, it would be very costly and difficult to remove. Secondly, it's our position that if this were to be removed from the buffer, there would be additional damage caused to the buffer and potentially the wetland adjacent to it. So I think both of those factors need to be considered when reviewing this.
Did you bring any samples from the pizza oven?
Unfortunately, I didn't.
Is there not any permit required to pave is there any permit requirement by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Environmental Protection, or Northwest Florida for impervious surfaces, paving, anything? I mean, if you were getting a boat ramp, wouldn't you have to have a permit for that from them?
If it were within the wetlands, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Now
the buffer.
But the buffer is a Walton County requirement. It's not observed by the Corps of Engineers or the DEP. And clearly, the wetlands were flagged, the wetlands were observed by the owner, and the pizza oven's not within the wetlands. He constructed it where he saw was upland area.
But this the language that you're referencing says no development located with the zone, with the exception of medical borrows, public access or other landward portions of docks which are otherwise permitted with the primary wetland. So if you're required to get a permit for it within the wetland, you would be required to, you wouldn't be able to do it. This is the way I read that. It says, which are otherwise permitted within the primary wetlands.
Which exhibit are you reading from?
B on E. Doesn't that say if you don't need a permit for it in the wetland, then you don't need a permit for it in the buffer? And if you would require a permit to pave in a wetland, that would mean you'd require a permit to pave in the buffer, thereby you couldn't pave the buffer. Maybe I'm misreading.
I think you're misreading it. I could be misreading it. What are you reading?
B, section B on exhibit B.
Within
land
secondary
development.
wetland protection zones, no development shall be located within the zone with the limited exception of minimal boardwalks, public access facilities, and other landward portions of docks which are otherwise permitted within primary wetland zones.
I think that's how I interpret that is, if it's a portion of a walkway to a dock that is permitted through DEP and the Corps, it's allowed. And this particular, you can see in the photo that this does access, it's in line with the boat dock. It is part of the access to the boat dock.
Anything else?
Well, why? If this was built 3 years ago, 4 years ago,
Why are we having this?
why are we talking about it now?
We're seeking a development order for a bed and breakfast on the property. And basically, during the course of review of that, it came up, there was a code case that came up for clearing of the buffer, and it was observed during the development order discussion and the code case. So we have done a restoration plan on the impact of the buffer, and we're complying with that so that we can proceed with the development order.
So none of the wetlands were, when the pavers and all this, none of the wetlands were impacted, it's just the buffer?
It's just the buffer, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let's hear from the county. We give you a chance to come back. Mr. Vice?
Just one question, and I'll let Vivian speak. What section of the land development code are we asking for a variance from, Dean?
Well, being that my point is that because it was built in 2012, the rules that were in place were section 4.01.02, paragraph B.
And was that's 10 feet, 10%?
It allows a 10% impact to the clearing of native vegetation within the zone.
That's what it allows for, is clearing of vegetation.
But not structures. But maybe go ahead.
Yeah, I think the documents provided here by the applicant basically it is for clearing of native vegetation, which is allowed. That does not address additional structures in the wetlands. Additionally, in his Exhibit F, it has the same language has existed for a very long time. I went back to the 2009 Comp Plan Land Development Code, and the same verbiage exists in both LDC and Comp Plan. Under wetlands, no development other than boardwalks, public access facilities, or docks shall be located within 25 feet of the above. And it does not allow for any structures to be built in the buffer. That has not changed. The additional question is, you cannot allow for a variance from the comprehensive plan, only from the land development code.
What about the code violation? What's the code violation?
That's not necessarily a part of this request. I think there have been several violations.
The code
out there.
violation is not this structure?
Is that part of one of the current code violations?
Let me go ahead.
Okay.
The pizza oven being in the buffer was one of the concerns. Primarily, it was the buffer itself had been cleared and required a restoration plan. One of the things that we stipulated in our restoration plan was that we we're going to restore the entire area that was impacted, with the exception of this area, because we're seeking a variance to it. Now, if the variance is denied and this has to come out, then it will be restored as well.
When you're speaking of, go ahead,
But-
Vivian. Go ahead. I'll address that in a minute.
I'm not even sure how we can hear this. I mean, it violates the comprehensive plan.
Well, and Tony, that's the reason that I included this exhibit is the pizza oven got put into the buffer by an honest mistake, by a homeowner who's not familiar with the code, wasn't directed to the code, or had no knowledge that there was a secondary buffer. He obviously understands there's wetlands. He did the responsible thing to get the wetlands flagged and built what he thought was a reasonable, something within a reasonable area of the property that he could build within. The reason that I point out Exhibit F is, from the comprehensive plan, is that the issue was raised that we can't have a variance if it's to the comprehensive plan. In my opinion, the comprehensive plan allows for 25% impact. Land Development Code allows for 10% impact. And we've evaluated the area of this pizza oven versus the entire buffer area that he owns on his property, and it's 7.8%. It's below the 10%
Sure.
impact that the code allows.
I understand what you're saying, but,
So what
but none of that, I mean, yes, it provides access, but it's not a dock, it's not a boardwalk. It provides, a portion of it provides access, but that's supposed to be by boardwalk, it's supposed to be minimizing the impact. I'm not even sure how we can, I don't even know that we can even consider the pizza oven.
Can we do this in our discussion on the motion?
Unless it gets dismissed, because we can't consider it.
Things don't get dismissed. He can just file it again next month and come back.
Okay.
And harvest it.
All right.
He'd go to the circuit court and come back the next month.
Well, there you go.
I didn't know if you had more questions of Vivian.
Yeah, we're gonna finish up with Vivian. I'm gonna give you his chance. Go ahead, Vivian.
I can't think of where we've allowed for 10% of just anything, whatever goes inside the buffer zone, or the 25% that he was talking about in the comprehensive plan. We don't allow for structures or anything other than the 10-foot swath going to through the wetlands in the buffer zone. So we don't allow for decks, patios, anything like that.
In that path that you allow to the docks, is there anything in the county that says that it has to be either natural material, boardwalk, or is there anything that says it can't be concrete or pavers?
I don't know. You can help me out with that. I think it says you can clear a 10-foot swath to the wetlands.
What's the question again, Tony?
Is there anything that actually gives us some guidance in saying that it can't be an impervious cover? I mean,
Can it be pavers or concrete?
can it be pavers in terms of that dock access?
That's not the issue. Our issue is the pizza. That's the only thing we're concerned with.
Well,
We're
not really, because the paving would have to go too, potentially. And it's definitely bigger than what they allow typically.
But is that not part of the code violation that they're bringing in compliance? Because he said they haven't to bring it in compliance.
Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I'm trying to find out.
I believe that the application only addressed the fire pit and the fire pit and the barbecue pizza oven.
But isn't the paving also an issue?
That was.
I think it would be. And let me just reiterate from policy C122 from the comprehensive plan, subsection 5, wetlands, no development. Well, let me go back to the preamble of that. The county shall establish the following buffer standards to protect environmentally sensitive lands. Subsection 5, wetlands, no development. Parent, other than boardwalks, docks, or other shoreline access structures shall be located within a minimum of 25 feet of a wetland.
So no pavers?
If it becomes a patio deck,
But Mac, you said
that
wetlands.
goes against the intent.
Pardon me?
If it's a patio deck, I mean, that goes against the intent of this preservation buffer. I mean, it's supposed to be protecting the wetland from runoff, and we're creating runoff. That's right.
On the pavers.
It's an impervious surface.
That's right. Okay.
I mean,
Well, this is impervious. Is
Okay.
that mortar?
you usually don't allow anything. I mean, its access is usually limited to an elevated dock.
Anything else, Ms. Vivian?
Not unless you have any more questions on that you.
Thank you. Are there anyone else here like to speak in regards to this? If you would come up and state your name for the record.
I think that might be pervious.
Hi, my name is Eric Scheifler. I'm the owner of the property. Eric Scheifler.
E-R-I-C?
S-C-H-E-U-F-L-E-R. E-R. As stated by Dean, everything was permitted at one time with the dock and all this. The actual guy who did the concrete work for that did the permitting for the dock and all that. And he also did the pilings for the home. So everything was done at the same time. I'm not sure of the actual time frame. I think it was 2011, 2012. So it was a true, honest mistake on my part. Had I known this, I simply would have pushed the dock back 25 foot. I never would have done this. I'm not trying to impact. I know y'all, none of them been out to the property, but I'm not that kind of person. Everything I've done out there is about water conservation, impervious surfaces. I understand all that. Honest mistake. Now, the point that I understand what you're saying is this is about preservation and about impacting the environment. Concrete, once it solidifies, does not affect fish, wildlife, so on and so forth. If that comes out of there, dust from concrete increases pH. pH burns fish, burns wildlife. So there's going to be an impact that way. And no matter how careful I am, taking this out, it's concrete. It's done. It's there. So it's kind of a conundrum. It's an honest mistake. It happened. It's there. But the impact of taking it out now is worse than almost leaving it there. I mean, I have other land in there. Could you mitigate that land? Take that buffer zone, make an exception in that case. Do that, make me provide benches to Eden Garden State Park. Do something positive for the community as opposed to doing something that's protective. And I understand your point, honest mistake. But at the same time, it's going to cause probably more damage taking it out than leaving it there.
That raises an interesting point. Is it, could we agree to
Come up,
Sure.
come on up.
We agree to take the area of the fire pit, the walkway, and the pizza oven, and add it on to the existing 25-foot buffer on the property. In other words, make the buffer, let's say, 30 feet to compensate for what's occupied by the fire pit and pizza oven in an effort to offset the impact.
How wide is the lot?
Excuse me?
How wide is the lot?
Well,
I mean, both of them together with the whole strip in there.
he actually owns 4 lots. This survey was just on lot 5 and 6.
About 600 or 700 foot maybe.
No, I mean, just these two surveys right here.
These two surveyed?
I mean, just rough. I mean, like 200 feet?
Yeah, roughly 200 feet. The frontage on the street is 156.
So that'd be, and you say it's 7% impacted in the buffer?
7.8, I think you said.
Okay, so we say 8%, so that's 800. So if you did it like that, you could move it to 28.9, roughly 29 foot.
Call it 30 feet. Yeah, roughly 30. Another 5 feet of buffer or somewhat slightly
my
less.
arithmetic might be off a little bit, doing it in my head,
Your Pizza Hut oven was built in 2012. I think
it's all built at the
He's
same
using
time.
this as his reference. It says the fireplace in 2012. Is that reference the pizza oven?
It was all built approximately at the same time. I'm not sure, like, go back and look for documentation, but I'd have to look. But it was all permitted at the same time. The dock, like I said, the guy that did the pilings for the home, the carriage house, did the permit for the dock. So I don't know the exact time reference, but it was all done at one time. Like everything was, because I wanted to try to get everything done, as close to possible, so the whole structure was.
So it was during the 2011-2012 timeframe.
Property appraiser document referencing the fireplace, is that the pizza oven that you're speaking of?
I think that's fire. Is there a fireplace in the house?
No, it's all the same thing. It's all the same. There's only one pizza oven. There's a fire pit and a pizza oven in the same. There's like a fireplace, pizza oven, and then fire. It's all part of the same thing.
I think
there's no other fireplace anywhere else.
So does the house have a fireplace in it?
No.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about.
They just called it a fireplace.
Yeah. They just called it a fireplace, not a pizza oven.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a fireplace next to the.
Yeah, and you're saying, Mr. Burgess, that the county approved this back in 2011?
Yes, the house received a CO. And I believe what you're saying, I forget if it was Mr. Johnson, that on the property appraiser's printout that I have, under the extra features data,
right,
it notes a fireplace.
Right.
And if the house doesn't have a fireplace, I would assume that it is the fire pit that they're referring to.
Mr. Burgess, I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify one thing. The county doesn't issue permits for docks, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'd be curious how it is about mitigation idea.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Mr. Dice, Mr. Fletcher has a question for you.
What's your all's reaction to the mitigation proposal?
I'll let Mr. Carpenter answer that question.
The comprehensive plan does not give us the authority to cut a deal when they're in violation of the comprehensive plan. It's just simple. Comprehensive plan says no development other than shoreline access structures, and this ain't that.
Where's the current language? Just deletes the 25%? Is that all it does, or does it add to it? What's the current? Because we're following the current language.
I'm going to read from the current language adopted effective March 1, 2011.
Matt, before you get started, there's something that kind of concerns me that has been said tonight. The Land Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan do not have to match exactly. The Land Development Code is intended to be much more explicit than the Comprehensive Plan. The notion that if they're somehow different, there's nothing wrong with that. The Land Development Code basically will set the very details and the specifics down that must be followed. The Comprehensive Plan is really just kind of a broad brush, long-range document. So I've heard several times the past several months, it's been insinuated that if they're different, then there's a big problem.
We do not have a conflict here, if I could.
Right. But I just want to make sure that that's known, because it's been insinuated that there has.
The 25% is within the secondary wetland protection zone. 4.0103, subsection B, the last sentence of that section. Clearing of native vegetation shall be limited to 25% of the total area within the zone. That doesn't say you can build anything. That just can clear access to the shoreline. It does not say you can build a single thing in that part of the Land Development Code. It just says you can clear the vegetation up to 25% within that zone.
And right now, I'm really more interested in the comprehensive plan because I don't even think we can hear this.
Well, I think you have grounds to deny this request based on the conflict with the comprehensive plan.
Oh, that's what I want to
This
focus
is a
on.
simple case, in my opinion.
And that's really what I want to focus on, is just the comprehensive plan. No development other than boardwalks, access facilities, and docks. And that language hasn't changed.
That language has not changed.
Okay.
And that language the current language was readopted March 1, 2011, which was before all of this construction.
Okay, thank you very much. If you want to come up and do your final, you make it quick. We fix it and close it.
0103.
I'll be brief. Basically, the comprehensive plan language, and I agree with Mr. Valley, we were looking at a way that we could comply with what the comprehensive plan maps out. And the difference between the current code and the code that was in place in 2012 is that a 10-foot swath, I believe in the new code, it specifies a 10-foot swath is allowed. It limits the width on it. In 2012, there's not a limitation on the width. And boardwalks, public access facilities, and docks, people put seating areas on their docks that I think it became an expanded portion of the code that became recognized, and they decided we need to limit it to 10 feet wide to prevent some of these type things. But this occurred back before that 10-foot period limitation on the code and the comprehensive plan was in place. And I think that's what allows us to consider and discuss this tonight. And I would hope that the board would consider it.
Thank you, sir. Motion to close the public discussion.
Motion. I think Mac's trying to say something.
No, we're going to close it. We close it.
Motion closed.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion.
Motion denied.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Tony made the motion, Mr. Miller, second.
Mr.
Miller.
Mr. Fletcher.
What?
Discussion.
Well, I'm like, I think all of us up here, you hate to see someone have to tear something down, but I mean, we constantly get hit with these mistakes that are made and try to correct them, and this one just sounds like we need to deny it in my mind.
Scott?
I agree with everybody else because the comp plan does say what it says, and it is black and white, like I always say. So.
Have a motion denied, second. Tony, how you vote?
I vote to deny.
Mr. Fletcher?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
To deny, in other words.
Aye to deny.
Aye to deny, yeah.
Deny.
Everybody voted to deny it. Voted in aye, right?
I think so.
I don't know. I get confused sometimes.
Mr. Burgess, we felt like that we just had to deny that. You want to
And I
try
hate
again? Are you up next one?
Yes, sir, I am. Oh, we got another one.
Okay.
Let's get a drink of water. I know what you want.
We're gonna take a break.
Take a pizza
This is
break.
yours. Yeah, seriously.
But a pizza break.
Thing is what you
I
do.
apologize if you misunderstood my communication skills.
You got hot from the first minute.
You go over there and you just
Okay, we're
light
live.
it, lay it down there in front of it, and let it look down.
Mr. Burgess, are you ready?
I am.
Scott, you ready?
Always ready.
Good evening. Again, my name's Dean Burgess with Emerald Coast Associates. I have been sworn. We're here to represent the Koblenzer petition for variance. I do have a set of exhibits for this one as well that I'd like to pass out. Here, exhibits A through F.
Is this one of those older subdivisions that?
Yes, and I think in simple terms I can explain this, and we may not need all the exhibits and support documentation because it is quite straightforward. The subdivision was platted in 1954, I believe, and along with it, covenants and restrictions were recorded that allowed for a 6-foot, among other things, a 6-foot rear setback. Kind of different from most Gulf front lots. The Gulf front lots do not extend all the way to the mean high water. There is a beach area that is reserved behind the lots, and you actually own a finite distance from the right-of-way. And I think in observance of that, they assigned a 6-foot rear setback in the covenants and restrictions to the lots. Actually, all of the lots, Gulf front and non-Gulf front, have that setback. Very briefly, what I've done in the exhibits, Exhibit A gives you an idea of the location. This is on Montgomery Street, near the Whiskey Bravo restaurant, the new Whiskey Bravo restaurant, kind of southeast of that. Sea Highland is the name, and I've included on Exhibit B a copy of the plat which illustrates the lots, that they don't extend all the way to the mean high water line. There's a beach reserved for the public on the lots along Montgomery Street.
You only asking for the rear, is that correct?
Just asking for the rear variance to that rear setback. Of course, the county code requires a 15-foot rear setback. We're simply just asking for the covenants and restrictions to be observed for the 6-foot rear setback. There currently is an existing structure on the property, and what they would like to do and are in the process of doing, receiving a building permit, is to build a second floor on that exact footprint of the home. And it would be difficult to build that with a 15-foot setback, and it would have to be offset from that first floor. I don't know that it could really be done.
They're gonna build a second story, the complete
Footprint?
first- yeah.
No, sir. Just probably about a half or 2/3 of the length of the house. We'll have a second floor. The front third or so of the house toward Montgomery Street will remain 1 story.
Are we hearing for all the houses or just for this one?
Just for this particular home.
Are we staying with the 25-foot from the street, which is greater than the county 20?
We're only asking for the rear setback.
So that other one would then, what would, I'll have to ask that. I'm curious if that's going to allow it to go to 20 on the front. I'm not sure if the board cares.
No, I asked.
Mr. Burge, I'm not understanding why, if they're building on the footprint they already have, do you need a variance? Would you explain that to me again?
There's I guess there was a directive issued that subdivisions, have to comply, whether they had covenants and restrictions or not. They have to comply with the requirements of the Land Development Code, which is a 15-foot rear setback. Now,
You're saying as constructed, it does not comply?
As constructed, it does not, yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, that answers the question.
As constructed, it complied with the two, went back.
With the
when
previous
it was
one.
built,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay,
When it was built.
that's
And-
what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that, you can plat a subdivision today and go record covenants and restrictions that contravene what the Land Development Code says, and they'll record them. And it's my assumption, I haven't conferred with staff or Mr. Dice, that it was the directive was to prevent that from happening, and from covenants and restrictions that were recorded after the comprehensive plan was in place in 96, from those type of attempts to skirt the setback requirements. These covenants and restrictions date back to 1954, and if I would continue with the exhibits, Exhibit D is their renewed covenants and restrictions, just to demonstrate that they are maintained in effect. Exhibit E is the original covenants and restrictions, and I included that in the packet specifically so that you can see this wasn't something that was brought about in subsequent renewals of the covenants. It was in the original covenants and restrictions under paragraph 3 of Exhibit E, 6 feet to the east or west or rear lot line. So we're just asking that the board allow them to continue to build on this particular home in accordance with the original recorded covenants and restrictions for the property.
What's your photo F?
Excuse me?
Your photo F. Are they under construction?
They are. The back of the home, this is a picture of the back of the home that shows the existing home and identifies that they're building entirely within that rear footprint of the home.
Any questions? Mr. Burgess, we'll give you a chance to come back.
Thank you.
Ms. Shamble?
I think this request is consistent with the other requests that we've had in the similar situations, and it establishes a consistent pattern of development within the subdivisions. This particular subdivision is a rather unique one. Just by looking at the plat, they have these viewways through like each of the houses. It's a very interesting plat to look at, and really was designed that way to preserve view corridors and so forth to the Gulf. So from a planning perspective, this is consistent with the previous decisions made by the board, and would continue that consistency.
You recommend us approving it?
That would be my recommendation from a planning perspective, yes.
Thank you very much. Any
Ms.
questions?
Yes, I do. I'm curious, why is, if a variance hasn't been granted, why are they under construction here?
I'm the homeowner, I could answer that.
Yeah, please. Can we do that?
Sure.
All right, please come up.
Mr. Hamill's through.
It wasn't our intent.
Excuse me, will you give your name?
Oh,
and
my name
place?
is Dale Koblenzer, Koblenzer. It wasn't our intent to do that, but Koblenzer. This is my personal home. We've owned this house since 1951. When I started this process, we were not expecting to have a variance. I was working with the planning department when they were going through everything. We thought we were done. I am under a pretty tight deadline because we use the house, and it's also a rental property in the summer, and I've had to start to relocate people that are supposed to be in this house, and there's a wedding there in 2 months. So we were anxious to get started. We ripped the roof off. Then the roof was off, and the house has been exposed. I found out that I needed this variance 6 weeks ago. We missed your last month's deadline, and we've kind of just been stuck.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to protect my home as best I can.
So you didn't think in putting on a partial second story that you needed any kind of permit for that?
No, not permit, variance.
Variance.
My architect and all the people I had talked to were shocked by that. We did a construction project a few years back and got a DEP permit, but all we were doing was going straight up. So I was a bit taken back by this.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So I guess we're gonna put this off for a few more months. Mr. Burns, is there anything you want to add?
No, sir.
Motion to close it?
Motion to close.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Discussion? No. Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the variance.
Second.
Mr. Fletcher? Scott?
He's just telling me, Scott, so.
Tony? Sorry about that.
Well, I keep looking that way, and you're looking over at Tony.
How do you vote, Tony?
Aye.
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 Well, if we...
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
If I can make a plea of the chairman and the board attorney.
Oh, you want it signed tonight?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I don't.
Well, wait till I get it.
No, being realistic, we understand
He's
it.
going to say yes, be what?
I'm going to scratch it on a napkin. No, we understand that it has to be drafted. If there is any way that we can expedite it so Mr. Koblenzer can continue construction, we would greatly appreciate it.
Isn't it 29
I-
days? that
Yes,
we
sir.
gotta wait?
I'll approve it as soon as I get it, and forward it to Mr. Johnson ASAP.
I'll sign it as soon as I get my verification.
That's all we can ask. Thank you.
August. August. Look it up. That's all of that.
Okay, what were we going to
And-
discuss?
It is a concern of mine that we're going to have new legal counsel. It has been, when we first started back in 92 or 91 or et cetera, the board chose Alan Raymond. He was our attorney until he passed. Since then, we have had several different ones. And I feel like that the board should have a say-so. I don't know what the process is. But I think from previously, you know, I personally think the code board attorney should be separate. That was David Holder back then. And Alan Raymond's ours. And I think we should have a say-so in who we hire.
So, but you're saying we should have code enforcement should have an attorney and we should have an attorney?
I don't think they can be handled the same, in my opinion, because, you know, I just think it's better if it's separated.
Is that the direction we're going?
I believe that there's an RFQ out for both individually.
And that's
So
what
an
it should
attorney,
be.
right? An attorney could
Because
apply
it's-
for both. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I just.
Oh, it's okay.
Chairman.
Why?
Why do they need to be separate? I'm just not sure, I don't know.
Because there's a possibility that we may not agree with some interpretation of their, okay, Nipper.
Well, I agree with that.
Nipper is a prime example. We shut Nipper down in 2012, I think it was. They should, in 30 days, the attorney for this board should have went to the circuit court and got an injunction to stop and cease the operation. They drag it out for 3 years, then it goes back to, and they came with us on a code board violation, and then they go back to the code board, and code board said they wasn't in violation, after we already voted that they were in violation in 2012. I mean, you know, that's why they need their attorney, we need our attorney, because we may not always agree, just like with the planning department. I personally think the county attorney needs to be the county attorney. I think the planning department needs their attorney. We need our attorney. I just don't think one attorney needs to serve in all the capacity. That's my personal opinion.
Well, let me ask you then, Sydney,
Yes.
what drove this?
I
mean,
a lot
because
of
we're talking tax dollars here.
right,
It doesn't
right.
matter if
A
it's
lot
tax
of
dollars. You're talking about representation for this board.
I understand that,
Right.
but I mean, what's wrong with Sydney or Mark? I mean, I don't
Because they
understand.
chose to go to the planning board.
What?
well, a lot of different factors are converging on this
What are
decision.
y'all eating lunch over there? Sarah over there at Wayne's house, and y'all having cookouts or something?
No, right now, Neighbors Gibbling Nickerson represents staff on contested hearings. Honestly, if we replace spending fees on Neighbors Gibbling Nickerson and get you guys an attorney, it's going to be a negligible difference, if any, in the costs. They'd be offset. And we obviously see staff on a regular basis, so it kind of makes sense for us to represent them, and we get you guys someone who has little or fewer dealings with staff on a day-to-day basis. That was our thinking.
Is it appropriate for us to have a motion that we address to the county commissioners that we request that we pick our attorney?
I'm up for that.
Oh.
I say let's do it next month.
No, let's.
Well, and just to clarify, we have an RFQ drafted. It should go out on the streets next week, but that's just to get the qualifications. Obviously,
Right.
we could set the parameters of how it's selected once we receive all the qualifications.
But we request, if this board votes, that we get to pick our attorney. Do you agree with that, Mr. Fletcher?
Well, I'm sitting here I would like to see them vet the qualifications and present so many to us if we go that route. I wouldn't want us to have to review all the applications.
And just to be clear, it's the BCC would be the one who would be entering into a contract with this attorney.
Right.
You guys can certainly, and the code board asked the same thing, and I promised them that I would address it with the BCC. So I'm more than happy to address your concerns with the BCC as well.
When
It's up to the BCC finally.
You say the RFQ just went out?
No.
It's not been drafted. It's
But
not
I mean, it's
complete.
going out next week?
I believe so, yes.
So have y'all put a time frame on when you
I
want
believe
that?
it's 30 days,
And then
which we're
30
required to
Right, and
advertise for
then,
a certain amount of time.
And then another 30 to go in front of the BCC? for them
It
to
actually
review.
shouldn't take that long to go back to the BCC.
Yeah, if it takes 60 to 90 days, it doesn't matter as long as we get the opportunity to have the say-so.
I'm just trying to think of
Well,
when I need to show up.
Bottom line,
Could just call you, and when you can come by and pick me up on the way there.
I can notify you of the date that it's scheduled for.
Mr. Miller, what do you think?
I think we ought to express our opinion that we feel strongly that we'd like to have a say in the selection of the
How do you want to do
attorney.
that? And he made the motion, you want to second?
Who made the motion?
What was the motion? He doesn't remember.
I don't remember.
I don't know, to me, we've got that right to go to the BCC meetings and make our comments known when they present these.
I would like to see a motion made, second, presented to the Board of County Commissioners that we request to have a say-so in our attorney. I don't see where that hurt, and then we can still show up. If you show
Well,
up.
do we want to have a say-so, or do we want to have the ultimate decision?
Well, no. The
That
ultimate
ain't gonna
decision's
happen.
with the BCC because
That's what I'm saying, that isn't gonna happen.
they're the entity that would enter into a contract with the attorney.
That's unfortunate.
Well,
But I think if we did a motion that they would take that, they should take it in consideration.
Not necessarily.
I doubt
I may disregard it.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to do it or not do it?
I don't think we accomplished anything,
Yes.
to be honest with you.
Will it hurt if we try?
It doesn't hurt anything.
I think we could just show up, you know, I mean, but we have to watch the paper and see when the RFQ goes out.
Well, Sydney said she would let us know.
I'll
Yeah,
let you guys know.
okay.
So you don't
I
want to
can
do
get
that?
your-
And then,
I don't know, I wouldn't know how to word a motion, because it's out of our hands. But input, we can certainly give them at any time.
Absolutely.
Personally, I don't care, but I defer to your judgment. If you think it's important, I would support it in terms of just having it as a statement, a request, just to acknowledge that
I agree.
that you have.
Give me your wording, sir, and I'll make a motion.
I agree. No, we're just going to do a statement.
yeah, I mean, that's all we need, because all we gotta do is show up, you know, at BCC,
I think
because
if
we'll have our
you did a
time.
statement, then they know that it's a concern of ours. If you just show up, they're going to pretty well have their mind made.
Well, that's what I meant,
how-
having our statement to give them, so they know they're on the record, that we're on the record stand.
How about if we agree on a simple statement and Sydney presents it to the BCC on our behalf?
I agree.
We'll let y'all two get together and,
Tony.
Tony, you're good.
I'm sorry.
I am?
Yeah.
No in trouble.
I would like to see us ask the BCC to allow us input into the selection of attorney for the zoning board of adjustments.
Consider our recommendation.
Sydney, who will make the selection of the candidates to present?
Why can't they present us
Mr.
with
Fletcher,
a
I
name,
s-
and then we present the one that we want?
Well, then, let's change it to say, let's ask them to allow us to vet the candidates.
Right.
I'm just going to throw this out here. I seriously doubt we're going to have a lot of applicants. That's just the impression.
I know two already.
Okay.
Who's going to choose the
My son will
attorneys
pass
that
the
are
bar
vetted?
in about 2 months, if you want to get him, get some rookie.
I got my cousin Vinny from New York that's,
Yeah, we get Daniel in over his head here real quick.
the two youths.
Sorry. Just real briefly, this is an unusual situation for attorneys. We don't have to pick the lowest bidder. So I've not been around when this has been done in the past, but I would imagine all the applicants would be brought before the BCC, and the BCC would make a decision of who to pick and then ask staff to negotiate regarding a contract and fees. Because with attorney's fees, we're not required to pick the lowest bidder.
But I guess, Joe, what you're suggesting is that we get to review the applicants and make their recommendations to
They can,
the
they
BCC?
can take the applicants and provide us with the top four, and then we can take and pick one and ask them to select our recommendation. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones that gonna sit
Have to
here
deal
night
with
after
them.
night, have
Yeah.
to deal with them and argue with them and correct them.
Have to fight
I'd
with
say
them
more
like
than
we do
four,
with
if,
Sydney.
who knows how many there are, but I'd say at least 6 candidates, if there are that many, that we'd like to review the credentials of the 6 of them and make our recommendation to the BCC. They're going to do what they want to do.
Would we want to interview these
I think we
folks?
could ask that they consider, at least consider our recommendation, and that my what I was going to suggest was be included in their vetting process, so we're not duplicating it. We can do it if there's meetings. I personally have to go to one meeting. We can attend whatever venue that's being done at, we can attend.
Well, let me suggest something that we did for the TDC director and also for county administrator, and that is that there was a committee selected, particularly for the TDC director about 3 years ago when Bagby was hired. I was one of 5 people on a vetting committee that went through about 35 candidates, and we rank ordered them, and we gave our recommendations to the TDC and or to the BCC rather, and we gave our, I think it was top 10 candidates and a point value to each of them. So we saw them before the BCC saw them, and they then took the top 10 candidates, and I won't tell you what number they hired, but it wasn't number 1. And what I'm saying is that they didn't rubber stamp our recommendation, but they certainly looked at the people that we put forward. So we could suggest the same sort of thing, that we be given first opportunity to comb through the candidates and then to rank order them and to give our recommendations to them so that then they could either say yay or nay to the people that we felt were best suited for the position.
I nominate Mr. Miller and Mr. Johnson to...
Well, and sorry, just slow down here for a second. Okay. Any meetings we have, any meetings that you guys have to be noticed. So
well,
this would substantially slow down the process.
Well, when we did the vetting for the TDC candidate, it was done right here. It was noticed, and there was a room full of people that were watching the process. So there was nothing done behind closed doors.
Right.
If you're going to take and advertise it, why can't we do it at the next meeting that we have here?
You need a 30-day notice, I believe.
Yeah, as long as we got the RFQs back by that date, we could.
You could go ahead and advertise it. You could advertise it that we would like that opportunity at the next at our meeting. Advertise it, and then the applicant
at this meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you, okay, I just want to clarify the direction. Would you like me to present something to the BCC for their consideration?
Yes.
And ask that they allow you an opportunity to have input on the selection?
Well, to vet the candidates, first of all, not just to have input, but I'd like to have a chance to comb through the people that do apply. I mean, who knows? We may get 30 people, we may get 2 people. But I'd like at least to have a chance to look at them and say, here are the 5 or 6 or 8 people that we think, and maybe even rank order them. These are the people that we think would best fit our situation. And then the decision would be up to them to decide which of them.
Let me ask this again. Who would be doing that without our involvement? Who would be doing that process?
I don't know, Mr. Fletcher. I imagine all of the RFQs would come back to the board, and the board would then make their selection.
Well, can we ask the board to let us look at those applications before the board considers them?
They'll be public, won't they? They'll be public, won't they?
Yeah.
RFQs? Yeah, you might go look at them.
Yeah. So why can't we look at them and comb through them before the BCC makes its choice?
Right. That's
and then if the BCC then decides they want to interview our top choices, fine, let them go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Are you making a motion?
I will, as soon as we figure out what we want to make a motion on.
Can somebody bring the sandwiches?
Yeah, I know.
That pizza oven would have come in handy right about now, but so let's start over again, Carrie. We're confusing here. So all right, let me try this, and if it makes sense, then Carrie can write it down. I'd like to make a motion that we request of the BCC that they allow us to have the first look at the candidates who have applied for the position and allow us to rank order those candidates and provide them with a list of the top candidates that we would like them to consider. The decision ultimately is theirs, but at least we would have a chance to give them our input to the process. If we word it any other way, that we word it vaguely and say we'd like some input, well, what does that mean? You know.
Would you make a motion?
So I made my motion. Carrie, can you filter that?
Basically, you're requesting from the BCC the ability to review the credentials and make a recommendation
to the
on the
BCC.
selection of the board attorney for the ZBA. Is that correct?
Correct. And phrase it so that we would like the first opportunity to vet the candidates.
Yeah, the word to vet them is critical, I think.
Okay. Vet the candidates first
And provide them
and
with,
make a recommendation to the.
and provide them with a list of our recommendations for their consideration. Read that back to us and somebody will second it maybe?
And provide them with a list of recommendations.
Yes. A list of candidates that we recommend.
I'll second whatever you come up with.
Whatever he said.
We're gonna skip the discussion.
There'll be no
All in
discussion.
favor, aye?
Aye.
And
Motion carried.
I briefly need to bring up an issue that I think that Miss Ward and Miss Sachs are here for. You guys have a letter from
Okay.
them. You may or may not remember this from the January ZBA meeting, but there was a request for a variance. It was a couple whose parents, I guess, had been in an automobile accident, and they needed a variance to reflect, I guess, I don't really remember it, but Miss
If it's all right
Ward
with the
asked
board,
that I bring
can
it
I-
up.
Can I
Excuse
address
me, Ms.
it?
Ward, before you
Yes, sir.
help refresh my memory. This is not familiar to me. Do you recall my being here for this? It's all very vague
Frankly,
to
I
me.
do not recall
Okay,
you
I
being
don't think
here.
I was here.
This was January 28th.
Yeah, I don't think I was here for that one.
Mr. and Mrs. Sorrentino's parents are elderly and diminishing in health. Mrs. Sorrentino's parents were in a car accident in October of last year and had significant diminished health due to that car accident. They require ongoing care.
Not to
The
cut Ms. Ward
variance-
off, you guys granted the variance. I think that there was an issue with the motion that was made, and Ms. Ward would like the order changed to
We-
reflect what their original request
Yeah,
was.
to speed this along specifically, when we were here at the meeting, we specifically talked about the reason for the variance and what we were asking for, which was, we talked at length about the land condo docs that govern the property. And we talked about removing the county's setbacks from being a burden on them and letting those land condo setbacks prevail.
Is this the one with the pool on it?
No.
No, this is the one.
This is the one where they're
upstairs.
expanding the house in order to accommodate their elderly parents.
And she could go upstairs and go outside in wheelchair.
No, this is the one where they needed to expand the first floor of the house.
Right.
Oh, they can't go outside and they can't go upstairs.
But if they get the variance, they could.
No, there's no, they're not going upstairs, or it's about them being able to, the house is such that they couldn't, they had to enclose a porch on 3 sides and add a small piece in order
And make a bedroom for
a
her?
bedroom, yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
And the nurse, they had to have a nurse that stayed with them 24/7. The mother is, just to refresh your memory, she can't not have her eyes on her husband because she's diminished mentally,
Yeah.
and he can't go upstairs because he has bad knees and back.
Sorry, Ms.
So-
Ward. You guys granted the variance.
Yes.
The issue is you made a motion to approve the variance as advertised. So the order was written as advertised, but that's not
Yes.
what Ms. Ward actually wanted. She wanted it to reflect the condo docs. I've informed her that that's not the way we advertised it, so there may be an issue. If any of the neighbors have a problem with it, they could challenge it if we amend the order. But if the board is inclined to amend the order as they would like, I told her that she would
We're
have to
asking you
address
to
that with
consider
the board.
amending the order according to the conversation we had at the hearing, so that the governing documents apply, which is a 10-foot rear setback. That's the difference. The narrative that you see that we turned in as our evidence reflects a 10-foot rear setback according to the covenants and restrictions. The reason that is important is the advertisement reflects what was on their building plan, and the property's at an angle. So one part of it is at 13 point something feet, and the other part is less. And so we have the variance. He can't start building because he doesn't want to be in violation of the variance.
Can we not advertise this and deal with it at the next meeting?
The problem, well, first of all, there's a multitude of problems. One is I'd have to renotice and re-sign everything, so we'd have to, it would be an additional fee monetarily on them.
But by what our board attorney is saying is different than what was advertised previously.
Advertised in the newspaper, what was sent out to all the property owners within 300 feet, which is significantly more than who is in the subdivision and includes the condo across the street, was to go from the county setbacks to the governing documents that were recorded. And that's in our packet.
That was what was sent out, but the advertising.
That's what was
in the
sent
paper
to
was
all
a
the
different
people in the
document.
neighborhood.
But that's a violation within itself, isn't it? Because it's not the same as the newspaper.
It's not a violation. We were asking for the same thing. What happened was, when we submitted the application did not say 13.2 feet. That did not happen. Vivian called me and very rightly said, we need to know how to advertise it. And I said, here's the site plan and here's the information. And there was a chart. And the chart did not have that last column because I was still drafting the narrative. So we sent that over to them and we sent it out. I didn't read the ad, unfortunately, and that's my fault. But when I sent the letters out, the letters clearly stated that what we're asking for is to go from the county setback to the governing documents that were recorded in the record of, and it has book and page and everything. Now, let me say as well, that's what we presented to the board, that's in the narrative, and that's in the letters that we sent to all the property owners within 300 feet, which includes all of the homeowners in the subdivision and across the street at the condo. We had no opposition to this request, and we had, in fact, most people said it's already built. Most of the houses are already built back in the day when they recorded the covenants, and there's no issue with them building to that. So what I understood from Mr. Davis and from Ms. Noyes was that we can ask you to do this. If you choose to do it, we are taking on the responsibility of whether or not somebody chooses to say that that's a problem. It doesn't affect you so much as it affects us. They could ask us to come back before the board at a later time.
And there is a sense of urgency because the parents that were hit by the bus that are disabled have been being cared for by one of the couple's brother and sister-in-law. Sister.
The wife's sister.
The wife's sister, while they are waiting to get this finished so that they can move them down here. It's been a very stressful situation for them. She committed suicide a couple of weeks ago. So now they don't have that caretaker anymore, and they need to be able to get down here and get moved in.
1 second. Mr. Carpenter, how you feel?
Don't have a problem with it. The burden of whether or not someone's going to challenge it is going to be on the applicant.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Does that need to be in our motion if we do this?
We recommend that it is.
Y'all ready?
Ready.
Yep. Close the public discussion.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion?
Mr. Fletcher. And just to clarify, that was to have the order, or for the variance to reflect the condominium documents. Okay.
What's the motion?
To have the final order reflect the condominium documents for the variance.
And that if there's any issues, that it would be upon the applicant to defend it.
Yes, sir.
That's in your motion.
Yes, sir.
Point of order, can I vote on this?
Yes, sir.
Because I didn't vote
Yes,
on it.
you can.
Remove the setbacks in the original governing documents.
Mm-hmm.
That's our motion. Who made it?
Wait, let me get it down first.
Do one of us that attended have to make that motion?
Original
Do what?
governing documents.
Whatever she said, I'll make the motion.
Yeah.
Whether one of the attendees at the previous meeting had better, it would be better for one of the attendees.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, I
Good
can
point.
tell you
She just said I could do
I
it,
can
but
tell
that's
you
all right,
what
do it.
attendees.
I didn't, I know, I was on a cruise ship.
No, you do not. Joe, Kevin, Tammy, Anthony, and Bill were here.
Tammy.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. As stated in the government documents, with the stipulation?
Yes. That the applicant
Will defend any.
will defend any challenges to the notice.
Yes. That's what I said.
Tony, did you second it?
I'll second
I know my Bluebell Great Divide's getting longer and longer for me to go.
We have a motion and a second.
Okay, who motioned?
Mr. Fletcher.
Valley, second.
Okay, Valley second.
Mr. Miller, how you vote?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
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 Mr. Fletcher?
Aye.
All ayes. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Is that why y'all stuck around?
Yes, it is.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion.
Minutes.
Minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Where are they? I don't know.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
I haven't seen it.
Where do you go?
Jeez.
What year is that from?
They've been approved. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Let's do it.
That's it.
Scott, you second.
Yes, ma'am.
Tim,
I
you
did.
seconded.
Yes.
Do you know that our attorney of record is getting married before our next meeting?
Oh, great. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yep.
Ta-da!
April 15th.
Where y'all going, if you don't mind
Tax
asking?
Oh,
day.
no,
She's
it's
getting
fine.
married at tax day.
I'm getting married in St. Pete. That's where my fiance's from. We're getting married in a park, and then we're having a reception at a baseball game. Rays
We're
baseball.
at down in St. Pete.
Are we all invited?
Sure.
We're at down there in St. Pete.
So it's like in the downtown area by the bay.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the parks down there. I don't really know the area that well.
Yeah, we had on our,
Thank you.
we probably had a pig picking down at the one you're getting
really?
married at. You'll like it.
Oh, good.
You're not
You'll
leaving
like
us though,
it.
right?
Oh, no. He lives here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you,
that's
Mr.
good.
Chairman.
Baseball, very, very good.
Yeah. He's a big baseball fan.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
All right. So.
Yes, sir.